All right. Thank you everybody here for attending our ISACA Local Sector Day. So this used to be annual, but thanks to MFA, we're actually doing it biannual. So this will be our second one this year. This is something we've done for several years in a row now. This is something that we like to say it's brought to you by your local government people. So ISACA Vancouver, what we do is we partner with organizations like MFA, and then we bring in people from the industry like yourselves to tell us what type of speakers would you want for that specific industry. And today we've curated an amazing set of speakers that we'll be starting with Penny in just a minute. But before that, I do want to say a few things about what is ISACA Vancouver, and then I want to pass it off to Renata to say a few things about our sponsor that made it happen, Municipal Finance Authority. So first of all, ISACA Vancouver, we are a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit accrediting body. ISACA Global is a large organization that has over, I believe, 200,000 certification holders. You might know ISACA from the CISA, Certified Information Security Auditor or Certified Information Security Manager. But ISACA Vancouver, we kind of take a little bit of a different view into this. While ISACA, the certification is well known, we really spend a lot of our energy on the local community. So you'll see our ISACA Vancouver chapter doing things like a mentorship program, events like local sector days, as well as the normal education that we provide. So we do a lot of different things, lots of different community events from mentorship to just coffee chats to sector days. So if you ever want a chance to network with some cybersecurity professionals, feel free to come to any ISACA event. It's not for members. Members just get discounts. It's for everybody. And I'll send a link to our calendar later today into the chat. All right. And with that, I want to pass it off to Renata. Renata, I'll let you introduce yourself and introduce MFA.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to Osaka for putting on these sessions. It is such a value for local governments in particular to save resources by having a free session with excellent speakers and not have to travel to attend it. So much appreciation to Osaka Vancouver. So I'm the Director of Technology and Strategy at the Municipal Finance Authority of British Columbia, which is a lot to say. So we go by MFA, which is a lovely segue into cybersecurity. So the MFA was created 55 years ago in 1970 to support the financial well-being of all of BC's local governments. And for that 55-year period, our mission really has been to finance municipal infrastructure and provide other low-cost, reliable financial solutions that are specifically designed to meet the needs of local government. So we fund all of the long-term capital projects for all of the BC municipalities and regional districts. The only exception is the city of Vancouver that likes to go it alone. And we also offer short-term lending and institutional investment products to support local government goals. So the question always comes up, why is a financial institution sponsoring something about cybersecurity? And that is really because our focus is on reducing risk and increasing resilience in the local government sector. So that part is really important. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's obviously an issue for individuals, every company, every sector, but also for all levels of government. And local governments seem to be really hard hit by this. They're frequently a target, and resources are really earmarked for things like keeping roads and schools and things like that going. So we've been sponsoring this, as Anthony mentioned, for a few years now, and really pleased to continue that. And as he also mentioned, love to hear what other topics you would like to hear about. I'm hoping we can continue to do this more than once a year, so please send that information. Feel free to reach out to me if you like. And I would also like to take a moment to thank all of the speakers who are part of this today. We have an excellent roster of topics and people speaking to those topics. So thank you to everyone. I hope you enjoy it. And we are recording it. So once that recording is available, you will get that and you might hear from me directly as a result. So look forward to hearing your feedback. And I'll hand it back to you, Anthony.
Amazing. Thanks for that. All right. So without further ado, I will give it directly to our first keynote here, Penny.
Okay. right. My screen is coming alive. All right. Well, hello. Thank you everyone for having me here. As many of you know, I love being the center of attention, so always happy to speak at different events. So, Penny Longman, I'm here because I have implemented and matured security awareness programs in a number of organizations and done a lot of research into the topic, which is kind of why I feel I can sort of stand up here and expound on it. So just so we're all clear, I'm here to kind of torch everything you thought you knew about cybersecurity awareness. No, seriously. Um, much of the advice, much of what I'm going to talk about is advice that I've actually given in the past and the not so distant past. But you know what? People change, hairstyles change, the world has changed, and the bad guys have changed, right? And so we have to think about what we need to do next and what tools we can use in our toolbox for that. Oops, sorry. Um, so, um, in the past, security teams in all organizations have been given sort of standard security awareness programs that were going to be best practice to implement, right? So let's talk about that. So basically, what you used to supposed to have in the past was yearly mandatory training, which was updated every year with the latest trends and issues. And everybody had to do it before the year end, or they got a little sad face on the company intranet tracking page. You were supposed to track and enforce, and your training is kind of got cute games and catchy music or not, right? You're supposed to send out monthly or quarterly fish testing emails, right? Basing them on current events. And then you're supposed to track who clicks. And if someone clicks, they get taken to what I always thought was very ominously called the education page, which was supposed to help them understand kind of, why they should have seen that as a phishing email. And you reported your click rates to your leadership, right? And they should always be going down, which never quite sure how that was always supposed to be going down. But anyway, then to mature your program a little bit more, you're supposed to create a champions program, cyber warriors, insiders, a group of people interested in cybersecurity. Um, uh, and so they would, get maybe extra training, some better swag, and the hope is that they'll go out and proselytize about cybersecurity to their peers, and everybody will like the security team more. And then in October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, you'd have like a Halloween scary cyber event, and you give away pens, that say stolen from information security. So I have done things like that in the past. I have recommended those things, and I've done many of them, except the pens. I remember the one org I worked at when I tried to sell them on the pens that say stolen from, like, you can't tell people they've stolen something. Anyway, the point sometimes with cybersecurity is don't take yourself too seriously. So like I said, I have recommended a lot of those things in the past, and they're not all bad. A lot of it is still basically valid, but you know what? It's not enough anymore. What I want to talk about now is why it's not enough anymore. So one of the things that I've said for many years about cybersecurity is that people have to be aware. We call it security awareness, but they have to be aware, but they also have to care, and then they have to know how to do the right thing, right? So those three things, and I use a crosswalk as an example. If I need to cross the road to do my job and there isn't a crosswalk in some reasonable distance, I'm just going to cross, right? I am fully aware that I'm not supposed to, but I also want to do my job. I'll look both ways. I'll be careful, but I'm just going to cross, right? Even though I was fully aware. But let's say there's an 8-year-old kid nearby watching me. Well, now everything changes, right? It changes things. I'm thinking, what if the kid follows me and gets hurt? What if tomorrow the kid looks and she says, "Oh, that reasonably respectable person yesterday, she ran across. Maybe I can too." All these things run through my head, and I hesitate. And why do I hesitate? Because suddenly I care. right? I see so many, I see the implications of breaking the rules very clear. I see so many possible ways, and this could be not a good idea, right? So that's the difference between being aware and actually caring. The last part about how they have to know how to do the right thing, well, my analogy breaks down there, so we'll just ignore that and talk about it later. So, but the problem, I mean, this is the problem according to Penny, but also the research I've done, is we still haven't got to the care. We're still working on the aware. And often that's because we approach it in the wrong way. We approach it the same way we teach people how to use the printer, right? We ignore the aspect of human psychology. And please, I'm not saying everybody does this, but in general, that's the way a lot of the cybersecurity kind of awareness has been. So if you're doing things differently, that's great. But just trying to sort of give some ideas to everybody. So we have to learn how to dig in to the cybersecurity a little bit more, into the psychology around it, so that we can make sure that we're doing a better job. And as you can see, graphics is not my strong suit, but I hope you get the gist of the slides here. So the world we live in, and part of the reason why the world has changed is the facts speak for themselves. So I was recently reading a study that said 64%, very accurate number, but of IT executives say that they've clicked on a fish. And 10% of those didn't report it. Now, again, this is probably mostly in the US, but still. So, an aside, I'm learning French, right? And I was so amused that the instructor, it's sort of an online thing, was saying, yes, and when French people want to say, whoa, they say, ooh la la. And I just thought it was hilarious because this big guy is saying, ooh la la. So I'm saying ooh la la all the time now. Anyway, so, ooh la la, like if the tech executives are clicking on everything, then what hope do we have, right? What about those of us who aren't supposed to be in the know? And not only that's scary with the way things were, but things are getting worse, right? And the world has changed, and not everything is because of that abbreviation that starts with A and is 2 letters long, which I usually try not to talk a whole lot about. But unfortunately, the world has changed at the moment because around phishing and security awareness because of AI. And it's changed for a number of reasons. So let's go there because we really have to. So the first reason is personalization. So say you can get AI to write an email for you in seconds. A threat actor can get AI to write an email customized for you in about as much time. In the time that they would in the past have to write an email, say to a 100-person company, they can now write a even more customized email to a 1,000-person company or even more, right? Again, to clarify, AI doesn't necessarily get them to do things they couldn't do before. It just changes orders of magnitude from a scale perspective. So the other thing too is AI can get the language right. And by that, I don't just mean that they use more grammatical English or whatever language, but the email you get from your bank, the way that it's phrased is very different from the email you get from Netflix or that Kickstarter company that you just supported. And because of AI, they can these emails can be much more customized. And remember, people click on an email or on a phishing link when it resonates or if it makes sense to them. And the personalizing can increase that. And now what's happening is, again, there's just so much more of the phishing emails that are so much more customized. That's one of the heart of, and to me, honestly, the biggest concern from a cybersecurity perspective. So the other thing that is, again, people can do it, but it's infinitely easier with bots, is they're actually upping the game on sort of phishing, where the first fished interaction is just you get connected perhaps with a person on the other end, or something directed, go to the site, talk to this, and then it's a chat bot. But what's happening is it's AI on the other side. And so they're not asking for your credentials right away. which normally should set everybody's alarm bells off. What they're doing is starting a conversation, right? They're doing that thing that works with humans where you connect and you start to trust and well, we've had this great conversation. How can they be phishing me? And so they built that trust, and then they ask for your credentials. And again, you may know that a lot of sort of scams that happen that start sometimes with phishing, they're actually done by trafficked human beings in compounds in Southeast Asia who are trapped there and have to do this as a human being. Well, the new age of AI, the shiny and blameless AI robots can kind of do all that dirty work. Honestly, if that's a positive outcome from AI, I'm all for it. But again, it's not that we couldn't do it before, or threat actors couldn't do it before. They can just do it much, much faster now. And so lastly, we're seeing a lot more of voice and text phishing, and it's again fueled in a similar way, but the texts are getting better, that kind of thing, right? And the voice with deep fakes. I would say the majority of us don't really have to worry about deep fakes in many cases, because that's obviously a very targeted one, and I don't think I have that much terribly exciting going on in my life that somebody's going to necessarily target me. But that is obviously a bigger concern. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit. So, social media phishing is increasing, and here's a little fun Mobius strip of our current society. So, because an ever increasing amount of content in social media is AI generated, it's easier and easier for AI to create content that seems totally legitimate, right? Which is some of the reason why some of the social media phishing is becoming more and more effective. It's also potentially a reason to stay away a little bit from social media. Anyway, so sooner or later, the answer is sooner or later, everybody's going to click. Almost it's kind of just we need to assume that sooner or later people are going to click. So we need to focus on the personal and the psychological side of why, but we also have to figure out, how to resolve things after a click. So what does the new security awareness program that's based on all of the, what's the new security awareness program? What does that look like, and how is it different? So, oops, sorry, too many things. So what I'm going to say is also, especially some of you from smaller organizations, reserve your judgment while I'm speaking. This is not pie in the sky, but it's kind of perfect world scenario. This is the next iteration, the next generation of your cybersecurity awareness. Again, for many reasons, a lot of orgs can't get there, but don't keep your mind open listening to some of these ideas, because there might be little ones that you can do. And I talk about some resources at the end that might help some of you. So, okay, so one of the most important things around training is, forget the once a year training, that lump thing that it's lame. We all ignore it, and it kind of never really sticks. One of the things that's supposed to be a little more meaningful for the general users is sort of more just-in-time training that's delivered at the point of infraction, right? So you try and send out sensitive data, and boom, the data dude pops up and asks you if you really want to send that plain text file from your password manager with your passwords to a Gmail account, right? Or you click on a fish, and wham, the fish explainer wizard pops up and kind of helps you understand why it was a fish. Or you try and feed legal case notes into a public AI model, and the ooh la la ethics angel suggests that maybe you shouldn't, right? That's the kind of meaningful training, and not just in cybersecurity, in lots of other things. So best in class cybersecurity training has some aspect of that sort of just-in-time training. Any block training that you need to do, like sort of recorded modules kind of thing, needs to be customized to the job role. So finance people will learn about not circumventing internal approval processes, no matter how convincing that voice message, right? And the field crews will learn that seriously, nobody is ever going to ask you to buy gift cards for them to give to people, right? The two different again, the block sort of standardized training that you might offer needs to be delivered in various formats. And I'm not talking about performance art, although, that might actually be more exciting, but you might maybe send a module every month or two rather than that big push at year end where your productivity tanks for a week because everyone's taking time doing their training. There's also evidence that nudging with reminders over time can be more effective than sort of one-off detailed training. But, and again, all of these things I'll talk a little bit more about later, rather than bullet point training, like you should do this and this, no matter how fun and gamified it is, a lot of companies are moving towards sort of shows like Netflix type series. And the reason is humans are a narrative species, right? We talk in analogies, we tell stories to make points. If I tell you a story, if I say you shouldn't do these things, but then you're caught up in this story about something, and it's like in the horror movie when the person goes to answer the door, you're like, don't answer the door. If I just said, don't answer the door when you were in a horror movie, it has lands differently than if you see them do it in the movie. The same kind of way to do the security awareness training. They type in, just in the background, type in some random password, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you're not supposed to do that. Anyway, so that's something else that's kind of really sort of being brought as a lot more meaningful training. So phishing training also needs to be upgraded. So your campaigns need to be bespoke for different groups, right? HR might get some phishes around fake applicants for jobs, and the execs might get some that are sort of more spear phishing for credentials, right? In addition, if I've been here a year and I haven't clicked on a single fish, why are you still sending me the fishes? Right? Why are you still sending me those simple ones? So your phishing needs to be personalized as well. So if I don't click on a lot of fishes, then I'm going to be fished less. Maybe every now and then I might just get a harder one to give me the chance to exercise my skills, but going to target the more frequent ones to people that deemed higher risk. Also, if you click often, then you're going to be sort of directed to do some training. And if you do the training and you click again, and again, depends on the size of the org, that's when we need to start to dive into the why. Why did you click on that? And then we can actually sort of work in a personalized way. Remember, I said to hold off on your disbelief about whether these are all possible. The other one is you're going to set up your cyber warriors or champions program. Well, yeah, actually, that one I got nothing bad to say about that. That is absolutely one of the most powerful ways in any size of an organization to improve to work towards the caring part and at least the knowing part in the security culture, right? So not only does it bring people from various areas together who can talk to each other, but the security team gets to hear from the coalface, so to speak, right? And I haven't implemented, but I always thought it was a really good idea. If you have like a nice, robust champions program, what I think would be really great is if they could create some business training that the security and IT teams need to take. Because I think sometimes security teams say, oh, we can use the champions to send this information out, but it actually has to come back and modify the way your IT and security teams work as well. So anyway, maybe one day I'll get the chance to try something like that. But one of the most important changes that you can make is to change from reporting click rates to reporting or to tracking reporting rates. So fish reports, how many fishes in our campaign were reported. Reporting is critical for a number of reasons. So first and most importantly, if it's a real fish and it got through all the other defenses, then our security teams need to know that so that they can go and scrub those emails from everybody else's mailbox or maybe go to people who might have opened it and check their machines, do any kind of remediation that they need to do. It's really important because also if it got through our defenses, we want to be able to, feed that into a better training to whatever tools the org is using to catch fishes. Another important reason is related to survivorship bias. So in the early days, and it's a bit of a story, but bear with me, it'll make sense. In the early days of flight, when planes would go out and the dog fights and they'd come back, they would know, there was very particular patterns of ammunition on the plane, and they're wanting to say, okay, how can we, where do we need to put the reinforcement in these planes so that, so that people survive more, so that more planes come back. And initially, if you look at it, you think, well, look, all those bullet holes. We need to put reinforcement where the bullet holes are. But that's actually where you need to put the bullet holes is where the reinforcement is where there are no bullet holes, because those are the planes that didn't come back, right? It's the same kind of thing with fishing. If we don't get good fishing statistics on, if we don't get notified of fishes that we might have missed, even if nobody clicks on them and they don't do anything, then how are we able to accurately understand and to improve our defenses, right? It needs the reporting of all the fishes, campaigns or otherwise, need to be, we need to know that as a security team. So, because we need to know kind of what we didn't survive, so to speak, right? Also, reporting a fish gives it an element of agency to users. They're like, oh, instead of just, oh, that's a fish, like, oh, I need to report that. And again, we'll talk about some tools to work on that in a little bit. So just check my tab. Okay. So the reality of how we get there. Security awareness is not a technical problem. Many aspects of security is not a technical problem, but it's a deeply human one, and we need to address it that way. So how can we use that understanding that technical tools can only go so far? And recent advances in psychology and other aspects of organizations to get better outcomes for our security awareness, right? How can we ensure that the time and money we spend on our security awareness gets the most benefit for our organizations and protects us and our teams? Organizations face similar challenges with other things, particularly one that I often sort of tie with is like safety training, right? It's that same thing, aware, care, etc. But also tech changes, adding technology rollouts, technology initiatives. And so this is where we actually kind of get back to the title around sort of organizational change management. From a security perspective, I'm really looking at how can we take pages out of organizational change management in order to better the way that we're approaching our cybersecurity. So this is taken from my favorite AI that is a local model that doesn't learn from my input, which is my favorite kind. OCM is about leadership commitment, right? Clear communication, employee involvement, and continuous reinforcement of new behaviors and processes. That's kind of exactly what we want to be doing in our cybersecurity program, right? We have to think of security awareness. So one of the ways we can approach security awareness is to think of it as tech that has to be adopted. Many of us have IT backgrounds, some don't, but if you think about any kind of IT initiatives in your organization, one of the things that we can use, and again, some of you may have seen this in your sort of IT activities, but is something called the ADKAR model. So if we break down the ADKAR model, the first A is for awareness. Oh, wait a minute. We already know that we need to be aware. If we're kind of go back to the aware care and know what to do. So, that makes sense. The next one is a desire to make the change or a desire to engage with the initiatives. Well, that's care, right? The third one, knowledge. Didn't we just say that the next thing is that the people have to know what to do next? Ability, that's one that's actually outside of this because that's your security and IT teams. They need to have the ability to do the right thing or adopt the new mindset. So you can tell them what to do. They need to have the knowledge, but the action or ability to do it actually has to be functionally possible for them to do. So, and then the last one is reinforcement. And again, that's not nagging, well, although sometimes that works. It's the giving them the same message from many different places, reminding, and that goes back to what we talked about little bits of sort of nudging in your overall program. So the other thing that's to realize here is that these things have to be done in order, right? You can't reinforce something that people aren't aware of yet. So how how is this directly applicable to security awareness? To a certain extent, it makes it explicitly clear that what we've been talking about, aware, care, and know how to do the right thing is actually consistent with some aspects of organizational change management, right? But it also makes it explicitly clear to us as to people as to your security teams that it's not just a one-step approach. It's got to be a planned, reasoned, and quite strategic approach. It's not just tossing some training over the fence and then blaming people when they didn't, when they clicked on a fish or when they made some other mistake, used a bad password kind of thing. So another way to think about OCM is considering adoption rates the same way that you would for the technology adoption cycle, right? So the actual percentages vary. So this is a distribution of a population in any given organization. So the higher the number, the more the people. So it shows the way that people tend to adopt new technologies. So here, these ones are sometimes called visionaries, but essentially early adopters are kind of this piece here. And then there's the chasm. So this model was developed a long time ago. The chasm was an advancement because the people who like your security champions, the people who get on board early are looking for very different things than the people who come later, right? The early adopters are looking for, they like, wow, that's really cool. I think that's a great idea. So those are the people that sometimes easy to get on board with your initiative, with your security program and all of that kind of thing. The problem is to go from early adopter to early majority. What those people want out of the situation is very, very different. The early majority, they're also sometimes called the pragmatic majority. They are the ones who want to, show me the money. What's in this for me? I'm not, they view the early adopters and the innovators as crazy people, right? And the issue with that is the early majority, they want to see facts. They want to see how it's worked in the past. They want it neatly laid out. They want it to be a good program because they're not one of those crazy people, jumping off the bridges. And that's the difficulty, is that in order for them to see what's been done before, they won't use the innovators and the early adopters because they don't consider them as good references. They're like, well, those people do everything, anything. So I'm not using them to convince me to do this. So you have to bridge that gap with your security programs around the people who are jumping on board because they're excited by it, and the early majority who are waiting for everyone else to have done it first, and they don't trust your early adopters. So that's the downside. And you can just do that through constant reinforcement and maturing your programs and all that kind of thing. The upside is that, and this is usually about 20%, 15, 18%. When you get interest in adoption past that point, you're kind of on a roll. It's potentially still uphill, but you're kind of on a roll because once you get into that early majority, then it convinces the late majority who are even more they're very conservative. The laggards I could do a whole talk about. Honestly, for me, when you're doing a program, you need to get the laggards in at the beginning because they're the ones who are going to point out all the things that are wrong with it that your innovators and early adopters don't do because they want it to work. But as I said, I can do a whole talk just on that. But once you get over that 20% of people really buying in, then as long as you keep doing the things you're supposed to be doing, you're actually really kind of moving, have the opportunity to really be moving things along. So the two sides of that, things that you can use to take to understand the security awareness program in your organization. So what does this really look like in reality, right? So for phishing, here's a list in no particular order. So like we said, customize, send different fishes to different groups, have different frequencies for non-clickers. Also, if possible, get some of that just in time going. A really particular one is make actually useful education pages. Maybe your education page, instead of just a page, is a video kind of pointing things out. It's also good to assign training that has to be done tomorrow kind of thing, because people might not have the time in the minute there. But if you follow up with them tomorrow, there's research which says that's actually almost as beneficial. It's tying the training to the event, even if there's a bit of a time gap. The other thing is, let's rephrase keep clicking, not to be so much of a fail, but to be a near miss, right? If the box falls on me, that's a fail. If it falls next to me, that's a near miss. And I know it kind of seems like, sophistry and sort of a participation medal, but that's the kind of psychology that really makes things work, because you can say, phew, I just had a near miss. You don't say, phew, I just failed, right? It changes the terminology. So, yeah, so and that comes in another area in a minute. So also change your metrics to reporting. If you can separate reporting on your fish campaigns from actual real fishes, and then use that to report to and that should be going up and up and up, and should be at pretty close to 100%, honestly, right? A little bit aspirational, but that, for all the reasons that we talked about, it also makes people feel a sense of responsibility that they have to do something when they see a fish. And here's one policy change. And when I first heard it, I was kind of like, just blew my mind. Change your security policy or your training or your security policy or acceptable thing to include mandatory fish reporting as one of the things in your policy. And I think, many orgs may already have this, but for some people, you may not realize that if you change that it's mandatory to report any fishes that come into your inbox, to your work inbox, it's like, people see that in the beginning when they go through those. You can then also use that in all your communications. As required by our security policy, you are required to report any fishes that you see. It just changes the landscape, because instead of saying you should report these fishes, it's like, no, like you have to report the fishes. And again, you're not going to follow it up with punitive statistics, but that just changes the whole conversation, kind of, in my perspective. The other thing is make it easy for people to report fishes. There's lots of tools out there, including Microsoft and some of the other platforms. They actually have a thing that can go in your Outlook inbox, so you can just click to report the fish. And same kind of crosswalk thing as well, right? It has to be easy. It has to be easy for them, simple for them, kind of to do that. So, and then one of these things that, make clicking not the focus of it all, make reporting the focus of it all. And that, changes a lot of the conversation. So what do we do if we're going to assume that people click on a fish? The one important thing you need to do is full-time, permanent, bulletproof amnesty for reporting after clicking. That's it. That's all, as my French boss used to say. That's it. That's all. There's just amnesty for if you click on a fish and you report it, you're home free. There might be times when, anyway, have a different process potentially for people to report fishing when they click, so they can get to your security team and etc. But if you make it so that when you click on the fish, all you get, and you report it, all you get is support, it can really kind of change the game. There's lots of conversations about if you click too many times. I'm not going to kind of get into that right now. So, some other kind of standard things, separation of duties. No one in your org, no matter what size it is, should be able to route $24 million somewhere from a Zoom call, right? And make your people realize they need to require, physical evidence. And an email from the CEO's personal Gmail account because, I can't get into my work email. You just, again, at most in finance or other professional organizations, you already know all this kind of thing. But something that actually sometimes works for smaller organizations is a code word. So when my kids were young, they went to different schools, and one caught a bus, and a caregiver would meet him after the bus and stuff. And so I'd seen this idea somewhere, so we had this code word. So if anyone approached him to say, "Oh, your mom sent me," they have to know the code word. And it was funny. I just kind of we told it to Grandma a while back, just in case she started getting calls from oh, Daniel's, he'd been in an accident. And I just reached out to my kids. I'm like, "You still remember the code word, right?" And yeah, we all still remember it. It can work with your family, but in this case, it can, right? Just the people who can make some certain sorts of decisions have to know the code word. When somebody leaves, you just change the code word. So just an idea. It's a very simple administrative control, but sometimes it can make the world of difference. So, maturing training, again, just in time is great, but it's not always achievable. But one thing you can do is try and split your training up into smaller modules. And like I said, send it every now and then. Also make it available on demand, because somebody might hear about something in their, something about, passwords, or they're doing their password and like, I can't remember, what's the story with that? So making it easy for them to go and be able to get some information on passwords. That's kind of that, again, that sort of just in time. So I'm going to just show you, if it works, I'm going to show you a little video of a trailer for one of the platforms, only a minute and a half, Know Before, on their series called the Inside Man. And I know some larger orgs like EA is actually kind of developing their own kind of thing. So let me see if I can make this work. And I'm going to go.
We can't hear anything right now.
Okay, I will cancel it. I thought that
I
might be
think
the
you
case.
might need to reshare your screen, and there might be a tick that says check enable sound. You can try that, and if that doesn't work, then you'll just have to
You know what? I will
voice
just,
over.
yeah, I will just, what I'll do is I'll put the link in the chat in a while, because it's just a YouTube video. And you can go in and check, but basically it's a minute and a half video. This is just like a teaser, and it's all about this guy who goes into this org, and it's like for this other org that wants to like have world domination. And throughout the series, they have, I know if you ever gone to a movie where you'd say, "Oh, was that real? Can they really do that?" Right? And what's the benefit of this is all of the things that happen are real things. People do things that they're not supposed to do. And he does things that you're like, really? You can actually do that? But it is all real things. So as you kind of go through it, you're caught up in the storyline. And so these things that otherwise are just bullets, points, and a thing are like, oh, that's how it can actually be used. So that's why that kind of of videos can be really, really valuable. Again, at any time, if you want to get a message across, particularly around security awareness, but anything, put it in a story. Humans relate to stories. We are creatures of story, of narrative. So I think that's a great sort of step. Again, it's often very, very expensive, but just letting you know all of these things. So. Okay, one of the other things I wanted to do was just go over some of the security awareness and training resources that either have free or low cost tiers. Now, again, I used my handy dandy local non-learning AI to come up with these. I did a brief check on most of them, but one that did come up, which I couldn't guarantee, was Huntress. Check that out if you can. I couldn't kind of verify that it had, but like this Go Fish, for instance, this one is open source. So if you have the resources in your organization to host it locally, that can be a really sort of easy one. And so these are training and fishing resources. Can I Fish is basically free up to 10 users, and then it's like, I don't know, $1 each after that, something like that. So quite reasonable. If you have Microsoft licenses, they have a whole lot of tools, and I will just leave that there and not give you my opinion of the Microsoft tools. But one of the things that I'm going to talk more specifically about is the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. Many organizations already know about it, but they might not understand quite the scope of what the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity does. So They do lots of things. But they do actually have quite substantial security awareness and training resources. So one of the things that you can do for that sort of nudging thing in your training is send out an email once a month. And you could put a bit of training in. And one of the other things, actually, I missed it on earlier screen. I want to talk about it. One of the things you can do is you can have, for people who are in a position to do that, you can actually have what are called confessions, where either leaders or sort of reputational leaders who can afford to admit they clicked on a fish, their story, the fish they clicked on, and their story about why they thought it was real, right? Because again, it's a story. People learn a lot more from a story, and it kind of gives, sort of legitimizes that reporting aspect of it. But the other thing you can do is good catches, right? So somebody sees a fish, reports it right away, and then your story can be about how the security team, they just had to pull it out of 20 mailboxes and do no remediation work on anyone. So, good for you for doing that, those kinds of things. Again, there's stories that can help people interact better, or sort of understand better. And then you could put those in your monthly newsletter. If you don't know where to start with the monthly newsletter, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has sort of a monthly content that you can go through and use. And again, the newsletter you send out that's not necessarily completely personalized and perfect is better than the newsletter you don't send out, right? And then you can do things like add in some training, add in some of these stories, that kind of thing. Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity also does a lot of incident response, helps you with vulnerability assessments. They can do threat assessments for you, a lot of collaboration tools. Again, many of your the security teams might already know about it, but the resources they offer from a security awareness and training thing can be really useful if you're a small team or trying to start out. The other resource that I'll mention is, again, depends on the org, but if you have a communications person or a communications team, or a social media team or something like that, the security team, we weren't all, well, to be honest, a lot of us went into tech because we didn't really like talking to people so much. But what you can do is get in touch with your marketing team or social media and say, hey, can you help us figure out how to get this out to our internal people, right? And then you can kind of create a little bit of a synergy, and use some internal resources rather than having to go externally. So that's what I've got here. I am happy to take any questions. Also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have some other resources. I know of some other things that are going on, webinars, that kind of thing, can sort of point you in different directions. But again, more than happy to talk a little bit more with you independently. And also, if there are any questions, happy to answer them for as long as much time as I have. Anthony? Am I going into the question myself? Let me see.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, there we go. I was having some issues there. Okay, so let me see. Does this work? Okay, great. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left here for some questions. Let me just see if I enabled the questions properly here, or if you guys can all just put it into the chat. Okay. So I do have someone DMing me a question, and then we have 5 more minutes for other questions. Okay, let me just quickly take a look. Okay, so first, Penny, one of the questions is, if you could pick three things, what would be the three most actionable things? So I think what they mean is like not security awareness training, but like, you mentioned I know you had that slide of like the real actionable things you can do. Maybe out of those, let's say you were up leveling your security awareness, what would be the top three things that you would add?
So I would say first of all, change your reporting to clicking. Sorry, it's been a long day. To reporting rather than clicking. To me, that's something critical. Change your policy if you haven't changed add that line in your policy, make it mandatory. And again, some of you be like, yeah, Penny, we already did that a year ago. But for some people that might be new information. And I would look at some sort of ongoing sort of newsletter or some sort of breaking up your training from that sort of, all or nothing kind of once off into, like I said, having it monthly, just finding some creative ways to kind of do the training rather than just that 1 month or yearly sit down, do it all, pay as little attention as you can, and kind of until you're done. One idea somebody gave me was, well, could we do, instead of having to do the module on passwords, could we join like a 20-minute thing where it's a Kahoot style quiz, and if you have to go through the quiz and answer questions, are these fishes or aren't these fishes, kind of thing, and then that can be your training rather than having to sit through the thing, or your testing kind of. So, and again, not everyone, does not necessarily a lot of time to do all of these things, but just shaking it up a little bit so that people see training as just something not so boring. So I would say those 3 things: policy change, changing what you report on, and just making some small tweaks to make the training a little bit more like something that you yourself might like to do.
Awesome. Okay. So, okay. So I have 2 other questions. So one from our good old anonymous attendee. What's the, excuse me, what's the one advice that you would share for the non-cyber, aka business people, to think about during those strategy planning times?
I mean, part of what I try to talk about is things that non-bit security people should be asking for and looking in their security teams. But I would say maybe what you need to do is think about what your organization has around a security awareness training program, and if possible, go talk to your security team, see if there's something, if there's any of these ideas might resonate with them, or just understand what they're doing in your organization. Also, just you as an individual, use some of Canadian Center for Cybersecurity has a lot of information, and there's a lot of stuff out there just for yourself as an individual. Just better understand security in general, so that you're sort of able to contribute a bit more in your organization, and sometimes understand more about what your security team is talking about.
Nice. Okay, great. And then so I have one more question here. And this is actually from me. So um, I have to do board reporting for security awareness. And generally, board reporting is here's how many phishing clicks you get, spear phishing, general phishing, et cetera, which is okay. Um, there's other ways to report to the board, and I've kind of figured out a couple of more ways that I think are a little bit better. But I'd want to hear a little bit about your thoughts, because you were mentioning like, you could kind of, with fishing, you can raise or lower the bar as much as you want, adding difficult, easy fishes. How with this new mentality of these new things that you're doing, what would be the best way to communicate these positive changes? So what's a better way to report to the board than giving them the clicks, essentially, is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So if you've been giving them the clicks, you're going to have to keep giving them you're going to have to sort of wean them off the clicks, because that's kind of their, one of the things that we've done with reporting clicking is trying to incorporate a difficulty score. And you might have already kind of been doing that as well, because, one day suddenly there's 20% or something, and it was because that one was just a doozy, right? And you don't want to, your outliers tell a story, so you don't want to get rid of that one, but so also having context around the clicking, but slowly kind of make that perhaps less and less, and talk more about the fishes that the impact of the phishing on the security team, the number of machines that had to be cleaned, but also again around the reporting. Look, we had 40% of our people report this fish that came through to all of us. It was a real fish. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think boards will look at and go, everybody reporting the campaign ones, that's also good because that shows that they're proactively engaged around fishing. Especially reporting somebody reported this fish and this is the amount of work it saved the security team. That's one that I find can be, don't do that too much or they'll think maybe they can reduce the security team, but you know what I mean? Just to kind of, this is the work that it saved to allow the team to do more important things. But yeah, you can't just, go cold turkey on the clicking thing, but put more context, highlight very specific things around it, and then just slowly introduce this reporting, the reporting side of things.
Awesome. Okay. No, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Penny. Right on time. That was a very insightful session, and we even got some time for some questions. So perfect on the timing. So thanks a lot. With
Okay,
that, we'll say
thank you.
thanks. We'll see you hopefully next time as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our next speaker here, and I'll let him introduce himself, Michael Hamilton.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am your neighbor to the south. I know that many of you think that you've rented an apartment above a meth lab, but not all of us are bad. So what I'd like to talk about is something called the PISCES project. PISCES stands for Public Infrastructure Security Cyber Education System. So let me get my deck going here. Okay. Hopefully, can you see that, Anthony?
Yep,
I'm assuming
you're all good.
yes. Okay, all right, let's get started. So, PISCES is a project that's focused on infrastructure protection, workforce development, and research at the college and university level. So, first of all, this is me, and I have done these things. I have been in information security for about 33 years, starting with hand rolling my own firewalls and selling them in Southern California in 1994. Before that, I did a lot of things that today would put you in prison. Yes, I've been the CISO of the city of Seattle, a policy advisor to Washington State, vice chair of a Homeland Security Government Coordinating Council for Infrastructure Protection. Before that, I was in the private sector, worked my way up to the managing consultant for VeriSign Global Security. And before all that, I did satellite oceanography for NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab. Catch me over a beer and I'll tell you how I got from ocean scientist to information security because now the statute of limitations has expired. I had been to the bottom of the ocean in an 8-foot titanium sphere called the Alvin. That's the research sub that found the Titanic. I have actually worked for organized crime and I play drums in 2 punk bands. So buckle up. This is my partner, Steve Stein. Steve is retired from Pacific Northwest National Labs, knows very well how to pull the levers of government and get things done at that level, federal level, state level. Steve works with lobbyists and universities. I am more focused on our technology stack and making sure that things stay alive. I help to run our analyst crew and our operations engineering staff. Okay, so here's where PISCES came from. So a long time ago, I was working in the private sector. I worked my way up again to managing consultant for VeriSign Global Security. I have been in and out of many Fortune corporations. During that time, I went to work on an airplane, lived in hotels, drove around in rental cars, and ate in restaurants all the time. And VeriSign drove a dump truck full of money to my house every 2 weeks. And then my daughter was born. And if you're going to be dad, you don't go to work on an airplane anymore. So I quit and took the job as the chief of information security for the city of Seattle. And when I got there, I had been through this evolution of managed security. So the company that VeriSign acquired where I came along was Guardant. And Guardant was one of the original MSSPs, Managed Security Service Provider. And when I got to work in local government, I started to meet all of the IT professionals that were my peers in all of these other organizations around the Puget Sound and Washington State, and said, you guys don't monitor your networks. You're all buying antivirus and firewalls and calling it good. It's not good. So along with some help from some mentors at the city of Seattle, who again were very good at pulling the levers of government, went and got some grant money and started a regional monitoring project. And at the time we called that PRISM, the Public Regional Information Security Event Management System. PRISM turned out to be really bad branding when Ed Snowden rolled over on the NSA, but set that aside. After leaving government and starting a company, the CIO for the state of Washington basically came and stood on my desk and said, I want you to come to work as a policy advisor for the state. And I said, there's no way I'm working for state government. And he said, how about a contract? I said, I'll give you 3 days a week. And the reason for that was because they wanted to take this project and put the state's fingerprints on that. They wanted to claim that. And the objective was to take the regional monitoring project, which at one time was 9 cities and counties, 6 maritime ports on Puget Sound, Snohomish PUD, which is a very large public utility district, Seattle Children's Hospital, right? There was a lot of data that we were aggregating around our region. And it was all on a single map, and you could see, hey, if Snowpud turns red, maybe they need a phone call, maybe they need some assistance. But we had no analysts working on that. So the idea was to bolt it onto the universities and use the data that we were collecting in real time as curriculum so that we could train people to be cyber analysts by being cyber analysts. So that's what we did. It did not work to work with the state and to try and bolt this onto the University of Washington. Both those organizations are too big, they don't move quickly, they are steeped in bureaucracy, didn't work. And we took multiple bites at this apple. It took about 10 years before we finally got it off the ground, and Western Washington University became the lead school in 2018. When I say the lead school, they developed and curate the curriculum. They run a cyber range where students have a portal that they enter and they can go in and they can set up virtual systems and they can hack systems and they can detonate malware and do all these things. That's where we put our monitoring stack. And they handle all the credentialing to make sure that the students can get access from all the universities that are teaching this curriculum. So finally, in about 2018, it became PISCES, the Public Infrastructure Security Cyber Education System. Now, here's why this is important. So, here in the United States and Canada as well, we talk about this idea of critical infrastructure. So dams, water, finance, energy, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A whole lot of that is local government. Local government cuts across a lot of the critical sectors. So water purification, waste treatment, traffic management, communications for law enforcement, public safety, election systems, right? And in Washington State, it's also energy, dams, right? A lot of our power comes from falling water. So local government is critical infrastructure. So it was, and me coming from this background now in local government, having been, at the city of Seattle and networking with everybody else in the state that does IT and government, this was a really good focus. So we talk about critical infrastructure at the local scale, the scale that we live our lives, right? If an ATM doesn't work, that's really annoying. If 911 doesn't work, that could be loss of life, okay? So if you're gonna focus somewhere, focus on what's important. Now we see that local government is the object of desire of many threat actors. So nation states, criminals, and they've identified local government in this way because it's critical, because the services provided, right? Quality of life, life safety, life sustaining services, things like that, right? Make my toilet flush, right? Flushing toilet is my metaphor for all of this. And so local government is just being pounded by criminals, nation states, because they're so critical, and mostly because they will pay the extortion demand to get back to operational continuity as quickly as possible, like a hospital. That's why hospitals, local government, and manufacturing are targeted the way they are. They're so critical, they're not gonna dither, they're gonna go ahead and likely to pay that extortion demand. So we see these threats rising, critical infrastructure, especially in local government, and it's a problem. At the same time, it's very difficult for local government to attract and retain qualified practitioners to be there to watch the networks, to provide incident response, to put out the fire on the grease stove, or the grease fire on the stove before the house is engulfed in flames, right? Local governments cannot compete for these resources. They're going to go work in the private sector. I say this with some authority. Cyber practitioners know that they can change their jobs every 6 months and double their salary. Now, lately in the United States, hiring has become a problem, but that's more because of the macroeconomics around that. But still, we are short resources. We need these resources. So where are we? All right, so local infrastructure, right? Flushing toilets, drinking water, right? 911, they're at risk, okay? Geopolitics, the geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in right now, have threats going way up. Cybercrime is being called the third largest economy in the world. They have an affiliate model where anyone can become a cyber criminal with no skills, and in fact, that's working. And domestically here in North America and in the UK, we have a group called Scattered Spider, and that's Gen Z teens and 20-somethings that have decided it's not okay to go spend money and go into debt to get a 4-year degree because it's not going to pay off. And income inequality is so bad that 4 people have all the money and it's always going to be that way. The wheels are clearly coming off democracy and the planet's trying to kill us. Why not go into crime, right? All right, that's why threats are at an all-time high. And now these people have proximity. They can do things that people on the other side of the world can't, like throw USB sticks in your bathrooms, okay? We have a shortage of people going to the good side, and we need to do something about that. And we see that local governments, public utilities, you probably saw that Iranians compromised a number of water utilities in the United States, not because they're uber hackers, but because the folks that worked at those water utilities never changed the default passwords on the Israeli-made programmable logic controllers and the little web servers running in there for admin access, and they were exposed to the internet. So the Iranians went and looked up all of the default passwords for these PLCs, walked in, started to tear things up. All right, a lot more of that is going to happen. So we're talking about organizations that are critical, under-budgeted, underserved, and need help. All right, quick primer on the very basic mathematics of cyber risk. There's 2 terms here: the likelihood that a bad thing happens and its impact or its consequence. What's a bad thing? Scary Russian cyber buffer overflow, phishing, SQL injection? No. Andrew had a question about board reporting, right? Well, if you're going to report to the board, you want to focus on the things that cost money. Unauthorized disclosure of protected records, theft through business email compromise, account redirection, extortion, ransomware, denial of service, being used as a third party to attack others, and just getting knocked down for the sake of getting knocked down, okay? And geopolitically, again, there's more of that happening right now, okay? Those are 5 business outcomes that cost money. Well, if you want to reduce the likelihood of those things happening, you buy that risk down with preventive controls. Train your users, use firewalls, filter your email, manage your vulnerabilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that's in the standards of practice and the regulatory requirements that almost everyone is exposed to right now. And once you've done everything you can to buy down risk by reducing the likelihood of a bad thing, unauthorized disclosure of protected records, theft, extortion, disruption, being used as a third party, you will never get that risk to zero, never. All right, our adversaries are well funded, they're very capable, and they are very determined, okay? You're not going to go glove to glove with the 3rd largest economy in the world and win. Then you turn to the impact term, and you want to buy down risk by approaching that impact term, and you do that through monitoring, detection, and effective response. You put out the grease fire on the stove before the house is engulfed in flames, and you have to monitor your network to do that. You have to have somebody looking at the alerts spewing out of your network and figuring out which ones are the ones that we really need to address, prioritizing those, getting after those, okay? Well, it turns out detection and response is a big gap for everyone, okay? That 200-day, right, until a compromised asset is actually detected on a network is probably a little low. I got this slide from the United States Secret Service some time ago, and these numbers are probably still reasonably accurate, but I think it's more than 200 days. About 70% of victims are notified by a third party, FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, the United States, right? And about 90% were not compliant with their regulatory requirements. That's kind of obvious and goes without saying. So, but detection and response is a pervasive gap. And I say with some authority, it's a real gap in local government, and especially smaller, underserved, rural local governments. And it doesn't matter if you're small, you still do critical things. And I've talked to lots and lots and lots of local governments. We're so small, who would come after us? It doesn't matter. In today's world, there are 3 prevalent methods that are used for initial access into a network before they go in and tear something up and extort and do whatever they do, right? So one of those is vulnerability exploit, right? We've got a product that faces the internet that goes bad. One of those is social engineering. And Penny was talking about social engineering and phishing. The other one is credential abuse, right? Password guessing is the background noise of the internet, right? Well, when we're talking about vulnerability exploit, so Cisco says, we found a vulnerability, here's a patch, and that comes out, and then you're going to prioritize that for how it's going to be applied, right? You're probably going to take that through some kind of change control. You're probably going to test that thing. And at the same time, the bad guys reverse engineer the exploit to figure out what it fixes. Or they reverse engineer the patch to figure out what it fixes, and they build the exploit to build that thing. Then it's all automated. The scanning is known to start in about 15 minutes after the announcement of the patch release. So now it's a race. And so little organizations that say, why would someone come after? The scanner doesn't care how small you are. It's all automated now. So, this is really a problem here, and we need to be able to detect these things when they happen, because preventing them is not working. All right, so here's what PISCES does. So PISCES does no-cost monitoring, cybersecurity monitoring for small local governments, healthcare, public utilities, school districts, things like that, mostly the public sector. There's some coloring outside the lines. Some of the states that we work with want to monitor their private sector organizations, the smaller ones. And when I say smaller ones, it's very important that we have a cutoff here. So our cutoff is sub 150 employees. So a small city or a county or a water utility, something like that. Sub 150 employees. Why? Because we are funded with grant money. And if you use grant money and compete with the private sector, that's a no-no, right? So we don't want to do that. And frankly, if you're larger than that, you should be looking for some either 24/7 service, or you should be trying to hire people, or you should be putting in technology that can be automated so you don't rely so much on people. But, you shouldn't be coming and looking for the free service. So we do a cutoff there so as not to raise the ire of the private sector. What we do is place a device on a network, and it routes metadata and IDS alerts, right? So no content, right? So it's source address, destination address, port protocol flags, timestamp size, the data about the data, so that we know who you talked to, what time it was, how frequently that conversation occurs, how many words were exchanged, but not what the words were. Okay, that and IDS alerts. So an intrusion detection system, we use Suricata. It's also enhanced by Zeek, which is, those are both open source. They're great. We provide the curriculum. Again, it's curated by Western Washington University, and it is consistently applied at all of the PISCES schools, and there are a lot of them. So students get operational experience with real-time events in critical infrastructure, and that differentiates them in the hiring process. So we're providing a modicum of infrastructure protection, right? The gap, the monitoring is the gap. right? They're all putting preventive controls in place, trying to buy down that risk. Here's the thing we want to do to minimize impact of something happening. And the students are being hired furiously. So yes, hiring right now, at least in the United States, has gotten really odd because everyone that says I got fired, and that's not sure that they're going to hire people that work back in federal agencies, and we kind of don't know where that's going to land. But private sector, and especially local and state government, public utilities, school districts, need some access to these practitioners. So here's how PISCES works. So again, we put a device on a network and it pulls metadata off, it strips off packet headers, and we're looking at the communication to and from the internet. And in some cases, depending on how that organization treats its edge switch as if it were a core router, so if finance wants to talk to HR, it has to bounce off that switch and be routed there. We can see all the internal traffic too, which is very useful. What we do is strip those packet headers off, and the IDS alerts and the packet headers, right, called net flows, all go over to a stack that we have running at Western Washington University, with a resilient stack now going at Central Washington University on the other side of the Cascade Mountains. Because when we get snuffed by an earthquake, things have to continue. So the students then at the universities, all being taught almost the identical curriculum. It's flavored to taste in some places, obviously. They're mining these alerts, looking for things that are significant. And when they find something that they think is significant, they'll create a ticket. They have to use a ticketing system. The one we use is called Mantis. And then that's assigned to our oversight analysts. So we have professional analysts that work with the students, provide them feedback on their tickets. Hey, there's no reason to investigate the provenance or the reputation of 192.168 1.25 because it's an RFC 1918 address, could be used by anyone, blah, blah, blah. And in the beginning of a quarter or a semester, we have to give a lot of feedback like that. Here's how all this stuff really works. So, which tells us that the background that the students get before they go into this class has to be really good in networking. I have to be able to say port 53 UDP protocol and have someone say to me, that's a DNS A record lookup. That's the kind of networking knowledge you need to be good as an analyst. So the oversight analyst then will either send the tickets back for more information or they will dig in themselves and they'll try to verify what the students found. And if we verify that there's an actual compromise or that there is a hostile scan going on, that then is reported to the communities we serve. We can also work with that community to pull data on request, what happened 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after, et cetera, et cetera. So that's essentially how PISCES works. We also have an engineering staff that's constantly working to make sure things all stay alive, that are building the sensors that we send out to our supported communities, that are upgrading some of the tools that we use. And in fact, we are, and I'll come back to this later, we're moving away from the ELK stack, right? Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And we're moving to one called Malcolm, which was developed at Idaho National Labs using Homeland Security funding and is capable of monitoring operational technologies. So programmable logic controllers, remote terminal units, Historian, HMI, human machine interface, right? The parts of a SCADA system, so that we can deploy this into public utilities and not only see the administrative side of the network and possible email compromise, phishing, blah, 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 but also attacks against true critical infrastructure and the operational technologies there. So the Malcolm platform. So this is a screenshot here from one of the dashboards you can set up using something called Archemy. And it shows exactly how something transmitted around in an environment. And so again, Malcolm is capable of OT monitoring. It enriches data with a tool called Zeek. It has Suricata embedded as an IDS. There's something called Netbox there that will do an asset inventory on a network. There are integration points for the research that our graduate students are doing with machine learning and artificial intelligence so that we can get more behavioral-based alerting and not just signature-based alerting, right? So if we create a statistical baseline of every object, every network object's average behavior, as soon as something does something that's 2 standard deviations from the mean, it throws off an alert. We didn't see the signature of the Emotet Trojan being delivered to your desktop, but you just did something so weird we have to look at you, right? So that's where we're going with that. There are really good visualization tools. One of those is called Kibana, and many of you may have some exposure to that already. And Archemy is a very good visualization tool. So the Malcolm platform that is still maintained by Idaho National Labs is what we're moving to. Malcolm talks to OpenSearch rather than Elastic. OpenSearch is Amazon's fork of Elastic. And they've made it so that it's got these really great modules that you can plug in to do greater detections than just signature-based, right? You can do rules-based detection, behavioral-based detection, and we're working on artificial intelligence-based detection. Okay, so when an organization wants to implement PISCES, there are a few choices to be made here. So most of them just want us to collect metadata. And part of the reason for that is everybody's regulated. So in the United States, local governments are regulated by the payment card industry, as are Canadians. So that's, cardholder data. HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and it's about privacy more than anything else, but health records are a no-no, can't see those. And the Criminal Justice Information Services Standard, known as CJIS. So that's why we only want metadata. We don't want to see criminal justice data. We don't want to see cardholder data. We don't want to see health data. We don't want to see personally identifiable data, nothing. So we only strip out metadata, so this is network-based at its core. If you want only that, we can deploy a very small form factor sensor going all the way down to a Raspberry Pi, right? Raspberry Pi is like this big. We usually send out a 1U rackable supermicro unit with an Atom processor, which is perfectly capable of doing nothing more than stripping metadata off and sending it off to our stack. If you are interested in having your own interface into your own data and be able to perform investigations and queries and things like that, we can set it up with a local instance of OpenSearch and give you all of those tools. We can add the asset inventory, Netbox. We can start to capture packets, keep those on premise. So if there is ever a question, what happened here, you can replay something right from the packet capture and see exactly what happened there. And then we have operational technology monitoring, where we're actually going to go into control rooms, dams, water utilities, things like that, and be able to monitor serial protocols like DCOM, Modbus, things like that, that are routed over IP, but are generally not seen by most of the monitoring technologies in use today, unless you go and buy the very expensive Dragos, Armis, Assimile is another one in healthcare. Those are all tools for monitoring operational technologies. Well, Malcolm does that too. Probably not as well. I mean, I will admit, PISCES is a happy meal, but it's sure better than nothing, especially when you can't afford anything. What we do not do. So, a commercial 24/7 SOC as a service, right, will monitor everything you will throw at them. And I've worked for several of these. I started a company that was recently acquired. This is what we did. PISCES does not monitor endpoints, so your CrowdStrike, right, your Microsoft Defender, we don't monitor those alerts. We don't monitor your cloud, so we can't look at AWS and all of the monitoring facilities they have there, like CloudWatch, CloudTrail, GuardDuty. We don't monitor those. Today, we don't monitor those. We don't grab the packets. We don't transmit packets over to anybody for inspection, and we don't have access to any packet capture that you may decide you want to keep on premise. We don't see any content, like I said. We cannot perform a remote quarantine. We can't put an asset in a little jail because we don't have access to our supported community's Microsoft tools. We don't want to extend ourselves out there to where we're doing admin for anybody. And we certainly don't respond to public disclosure requests, okay? Somebody asks us for, to disclose, hey, can we have the data for this city for the last 90 days? We tell them to pound sand. And I think it's important to know that we only keep 90 days worth of data. So our 90 days worth of data, again, is only metadata and IDS alerts. Most of the communities that we serve, the organizations that we serve, use RFC 1918 addressing internally. So if somebody came and stole everything we have, they're going to see a bunch of 192.168s and 172.16s and 10.100s that cannot be identified anywhere, okay? Okay, one of the interesting things is, and I don't know how well this maps to Canada, and I was not able to find any research about this, but in the United States, cybersecurity analyst is the 5th fastest growing job. And it is, in fact, 2 years ago, it was the 10th fastest growing job. So we know that there's still a lot of hiring capacity out there. I think once we get through our federal government dysfunction, I think things will bounce back and hiring will pick back up. Right now, it seems to have slowed down. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn saying that they put out 2,000 resumes and, got 25 interviews and none of them went anywhere. That may be a sign of the uncertainty, and the tariffs and all of those things that make business planning very hard to do. But information security analyst, 5th fastest growing job in the country. These are the butts we need in seats, okay? Also, we need the wind turbine and the solar people, but we need butts in seats. We need cyber analysts. So this is the one thing we focus on. Now, a lot of you educators, I talk to students all the time. I say, you can go get your bright new shiny degree in cybersecurity and know this much about this many things. If you get your pedigree the way I did, you're going to go to prison, right? So I don't know that people rolling off the assembly line with a degree in cybersecurity really have any marketable skills. And if we treat this more like trade school, and that's one of the things that the United States has started to do, look at skills-based hiring rather than based on your diploma and your certifications and things like that. Experience is something that employers want. And if you can claim operational experience with real-time events in critical infrastructure, that differentiates you in the hiring process. Okay, here's who's been doing hiring, right? This is a sample of the hiring organizations. So, we've got some defense industrial base in here. We've got some finance in here. We've got consulting in here. We've got manufacturing, General Motors, AWS, right? And in fact, a lot of these are consulting organizations that are, let's say, embracing the times and trying to compensate for the fact that employers don't want to have employees, but they don't mind hiring consultants. And so there's a lot of consulting organizations, like you see Coalfire on there, that's Ernst & Young, right? These are consulting organizations that farm out their practitioners to do project-based work. So lots and lots and lots of hiring going on. We also have an alumni portal so that we can try and track. Now that has to be voluntary. In the United States, there's a law called FERPA, the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act. And so you can't track what happens with a student throughout their career. But if you get them to sign up on the alumni portal, and we can provide them help, assistance in getting placed and things like this, and gather information from them, like how long did it take to get hired? What was your starting salary? How long were you there? Did you get promoted, right? All of these things, all of these metrics we're trying to collect. It's a little difficult given the regulatory environment, but we're working on that. Okay, so the other thing PISCES does, we handle a bunch of, let's say, legal agreements. They're not contracts, they're agreements. So we have a statement of service that we provide to the organizations that we monitor. And we say, PISCES is a happy meal. During Christmas break, there are no students. We have our analysts working on things, but during the school year, there's 60, 80 students that are mining the data looking for these things. Well, I mean, holiday time, when school's not in, spring break, things like that, we don't have all those. So we make that very clear. We have curriculum agreements with the colleges and universities that teach, so that they understand we are curating this curriculum, we're providing this to you. When I say curriculum, there is an analyst class, there's a SOC operations class, there's a K-12 canned data set that anybody can use. We just give anybody access to that. It's not the live fire. And a course that was just developed at Pacific Northwest National Labs is on operational technology security, and will soon be added to the PISCES portfolio of classes that can be offered, so OT security. So colleges and universities will sign an agreement that says, yeah, we're going to do it this way, right? There are other requirements. Students have to sign an NDA. We don't really need to do a background check, but they do need to sign an NDA. We have also an agreement with our lead school in the states that we operate. We are mostly in Washington State. We monitor some rural healthcare and public sector in Kentucky. We monitor county in Idaho. We are monitoring organizations, including a private sector organization in the state of Montana. That's an expansion state for us. And Hawaii is an expansion state. So different states are going to have different lead schools, and the lead school will be somewhat responsible for making sure that information is transmitted to all of the other schools in the state so that we all stay on the same page. We have a monthly instructors meeting, and one of our board members, who is also an instructor at Central Washington University, will go through what changes have been made, what do you need to do, here's some new dashboards in the dashboard armory for the students, et cetera, et cetera. PISCES also supports our engineering team, our oversight analysts. We have a number of interns that work with us pretty much continuously. We have to have logistics support, so we got to order computers, get them shipped around. Management, finance, HR, and myself, I act as CTO and help keep the wheels on technology. And again, Steve is the executive director and works with government. So this is kind of what the business infrastructure looks like in the agreements that we have with different organizations. Okay, so the outcomes. Clearly, we want to provide monitoring response at no cost to small local governments. We want to raise the bench strength of the 5th fastest growing job in the country, the butts that we need in seats. And we have opportunities for graduate research in machine learning, artificial intelligence. I actually think that there is some potential in time series analysis and looking at the attributes of network flows and seeing what the covariance of those flows are. Do they covary normally? Do they not covary when malware hits? Things like that. Anyway, there's a lot of research potential here. And so right now about 12 graduate students are working on detection analytics. So plenty of opportunity for that. Typical things we find. We have found some really big things. We have found a compromised HVAC system. So a compromised HVAC system in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. A compromised HVAC system in a data center, if it goes down, 15 minutes later, it's not a data center anymore. It's a steaming pile of rubble. That's it. We caught a compromised laptop in a water utility that was used as human-machine interface. Most of the time, we're finding brute forcing attempts on VPNs and remote access protocols, right? RDP, remote desktop protocol, happens all the time. Lots of scanning by IoT botnets that are looking for cameras, thermostats, doorbells. I mean, all of the IoT that everybody hangs on everything now, which, and a lot of that is in local government, the whole smart cities. So, there's a whole lot of that going on. We find policy problems, right? Tor, right? The onion router, maybe, okay to use in some organizations. We'll report that as, potential policy issue. Configuration issues. We found things like an edge firewall that was trying to resolve every connection it got from the outside by going to its internal DNS server, which doesn't know where that thing is, and it's got to go ask somewhere else. So that bounce we said, hey, if we can reconfigure DNS, your network's going to work better. So there are sometimes we find configuration issues that will actually improve network performance. Lots of scanning for, open shares. As I said, some compromised system. Credentials in the clear. We see credentials in clear. We have to, immediately talk about that because it might be a regulatory violation that somebody needs to clean up right away. So, typical notifications are, hey, we found this really bad actor scanning your network. It looks like they were trying to access this particular system. We recommend that you either lock that system off from the internet or block that address and possibly the domain name that it's coming from, and possibly something as large as a CIDR block sometimes. Okay, so here's a sample investigation report that goes out. This is a community in Montana. So multiple probing attempts and using application layer protocols, TLS over HTTP, which is kind of weird. IDS alerts were triggered for protocol mismatches. TCP flags were bad. Malformed connection attempts kept trying. And so this was clearly targeted reconnaissance, right? Nothing has happened, right? But somebody's pounding on a system. And so we reported it, all right? And so here are the recommendations, right? Block that IP address, audit the services, and frankly, we don't know if this was successful. We think it was not, but it's not a bad idea to go scan that system for any potential problems using a tool that is different from the EDR or antivirus agent that's already running on it. Why use a different tool? Because if the thing that was running on it would work, it would have worked, right? We got to use something different. So we'll recommend, use Malwarebytes or something like that. And here's what we hear back from our customers after we give them a report like this, right? Hey, we took this guy offline. This was a law enforcement server. Law enforcement seems to be particularly bad at security. We find a lot of law enforcement stuff. So they just took it offline. They geo-blocked the address, and now those probing missions can't be successful anymore. Bad guys may just route around that, but we've put this little fire out. All right, so here's kind of where there's a bit of a roadmap, but it's also a bit of, the situation at time equals now. So we've added a SOC operations class. We do have a certificate, a PISCES certificate that we developed along with Homeland Security that can be provided. It is now recognized. We do have that K-12 program with CAN data. Again, that's for anybody to use. We don't care. We think the younger the better, especially to try and stem the flow of the Gen Zs that are greedily getting into cybercrime. If we can get them to go to the good side, and part of that is getting them started earlier, we definitely want to do that. Local government internships. We're working on funding, working with Workforce Snohomish. Snohomish is a county here in Washington State, to get funding to pay interns so that we can place them in local governments, rural healthcare, those critical organizations that we don't want getting knocked over and that can't hire practitioners. We're going to give them to you. We'll pay them. And there is a method that was used by an initiative in Idaho that is now deprecated. It's not around anymore. But what they did was they would place their interns for a period of 6 months or a year, and a month before the end of that internship, a new intern would come in, be trained by the old intern, who would then roll off, so that there was some knowledge transfer there. So we can provide continuous coverage there with interns. We do routine perimeter scanning. We have a nonprofit license for Nessus, and we scan everybody's perimeter and send them a report. We are monitoring some rural healthcare. We're doing that in Kentucky. Hawaii wants us to be all in on their healthcare. We are trying to lean into treating this more like trade school, and not a 4-year degree where you learn a little teeny bit about a whole lot of things and you're not going to be good at any of them, right? This takes a lot of time to get good at this stuff. But if we can really lean into This is trade school. You're going to be an analyst. This is the one thing you're going to learn. You're going to learn networking. You're going to learn how networks work. And you're going to learn to be an analyst. And we are moving to this Malcolm stack. In fact, the transition is underway right now. We have both an ELK stack and an OpenSearch stack running out at Western Washington University. And as we transition from the collectors that we have been using that strip the metadata and that send the packet or send the IDS alerts over to these Malcolm sensors called Hedgehog, which does essentially the same thing, but now it can be enriched by all the Malcolm stack running there at Western along with OpenSearch. And what's coming is this operational technology monitoring. The coursework has already been developed by Pacific Northwest PNNL. Idaho National Labs also has good curriculum, good training on OT security, and we will try to implement a little bit of that. And it's being piloted right now at one of our community colleges. So this is how PISCES is trying to step up and provide the kinds of things that students really need to learn to go out there and work in these environments that are really under threat and really are critical at the scale we live our lives. Okay, so how is PISCES applied? It can be added to as a class to an existing cyber program, right? It's a great way to do it. Not everybody can do it that way. It can be a capstone or a senior research project. A lot of schools do it that way, and it's abbreviated that way, but they still get the benefit of, the operational experience. And if they can achieve the metrics for the volume and quality of tickets, okay, then they are afforded the PISCES certificate, invited into the alumni portal. Hope they sign up for that so we can not so much track them, but gather metrics on how successful this program is in achieving our core outcome, which is butts and seats, right? It's not training, and it's really not infrastructure protection. It's getting people out into the workforce as the practitioners we need. It could be an internship. And in fact, PISCES, the organization, takes interns from Washington State, the ones that are really good. We really get the cream of the crop, and that's where our analysts come from. That's where our engineers come from, and that's a very good pipeline for us. We want to make that pipeline available to others. So schools, colleges, and universities, if there are mandatory internships required as a condition of graduation, they can intern with us. They can go out and intern in a local government or in a healthcare organization or in a public utility or wherever you want to place in critical manufacturing, things like that. And then many students continue to do PISCES as a club after the class is over. And we encourage this because the more eyes on that we have, the better that we are at making sure that we see the things that we need to see and report to avoid the outcomes that we don't like. Records disclosure, theft, extortion, disruption, and being used as a third party to attack others. How is PISCES funded? So in the states here, there's a number of ways that this can be done. So in Washington State, we just have an appropriation in the state budget, and we have to go and fight for that every year. This year, we're working with lobbyists, we're working with other universities to try and get that moved into general fund so that it's an appropriation that happens every year without us having to repitch. Hawaii and Montana are using the state and local cybersecurity grant program to fund PISCES for a few years. That's a really good way to do this. And thankfully, in the United States, so far, until the political wind gets weird again, Congress has seemed to approve a 10-year extension of the state local cybersecurity grant program. So we are in the process of reaching out to the National Governors Association, Western Governors Association, National Association of State Legislators to incentivize them to think about PISCES as part of an all-of-state strategy. This is not respective to Canada, but here in the US, we have an executive order that came out from the Trump administration that said state and local government is now responsible for disaster management and infrastructure protection. And that was at the same time that CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, was cut to the bone. I mean, just to the bone. So it's really a good idea to use state local cyber grant funds for this. But that's not the way it's done everywhere. Colorado, you can see used their attorney general budget to do this. So what does this cost? It depends on the size of the footprint in the state. How many schools are teaching the curriculum? How many organizations are being monitored at no cost to them? And are we having practitioners roll off the assembly line and getting into jobs? When that happens, we got to convert over to state funding for operations and maintenance, right? We can use federal funding to start that footprint, but once it gets to be a certain size, we need to have that a priori conversation with the state in order to make sure that we get some kind of funding from the state and get away from federal funding. Federal funding is very fickle. And I'll say too that I keep talking about states. Provinces we're very interested in the provinces. So on our board of directors, Brandon Hardenbrook is on the board of directors, and he's one of the principals at PENWR. So that's the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, which is 5 Western states and 5 Canadian provinces. We are very interested in getting into Canada. I speak fluent Canadian. Okay, so here's what a state footprint looks like in Washington State. This is all the local governments that we're monitoring. There is some water utilities in here, fire and water. There's a little bit of emergency management in here. And there are the academic institutions that are all teaching the curriculum. I would say a couple of these probably need to peel off because we haven't seen them conduct a class for a year. And so once that happens, we contact them, and really they probably lost an instructor. Turns out that instructor training is a very big part of what we need to do because for the most part, instructors have never had this job. So this is new for them as well. So this is what a state footprint looks like, right? There are some issues that are specific to Canada. So historically, right, we all have these privacy statutes. The one that's in the United States that drives everyone crazy is the California Consumer Privacy Act, because in it there is a private right of action, which means that if your record has been disclosed, you can join a class as a plaintiff and sue, okay? So we're suing our hospitals out of business, okay? That's just dumb American stuff we do, all right? But Canada has historically regarded an IP address as personally identifiable, okay? And largely because of the NSA, Canada has prohibited cross-border transfer of personally identifiable information, okay, per your privacy statute. However, there are some error bars on that, and my understanding is that provincial privacy ministers do have some latitude in what they can approve in terms of cross-border transfer of IP addresses. So for PISCES or something PISCES-like to be instantiated in Canada, we may have to do deals with privacy ministers, or we may just have to deploy in Canada, which is probably the better idea anyway. So there would need to be a lead university, BCIT, I'm looking at you, right, that would agree to house the monitoring stack and run the cyber range so that the authentication credentials for the students were managed every quarter. End of the quarter, you're out of there, right? Unless you've joined a club, and we have a process for doing that. We have to be very strict about how we control access to the stack and the credentials that students have that have to time out at the end of the class. Okay, here's how to contact PISCES. I am MKH, that's Steve.Stein. On our website, there is a contact us form. We have a YouTube channel. We routinely post on LinkedIn with Student of the Month. It might even be Student of the Week. I don't know, my interns are doing a great job. I think we've gone to Student of the Week. The videos are there. They're podcasts where I talk in some detail with some interview about PISCES, but you kind of got the benefit of that just now. I will make this presentation available to Andrew or to Anthony, and he can send this around to anybody that wants it. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Awesome. All right. So, and this is recorded, so we will be posting this on YouTube like we did on the previous one in a couple of weeks. Okay, so there's a couple of questions. So I think you may have already answered one of them in your presentation. Do you already have any schools that you are in talks with
In Canada?
Yeah.
No, we've had a little bit of interaction with BCIT. And that was actually more than a year ago. And that's when I ran into, we've actually talked to the consulate here in Seattle multiple times. And that's when they said, you're going to need to probably talk to the provincial privacy minister to see how this lands. And we have not had that conversation.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And then another question here is, I do see PISCES accept volunteer applications on the website. Is there any requirement or should be located in the United States?
Well, again, it has to do with this cross-border transfer of information. And I think the preference for Canada would be to deploy the monitoring stack in Canada and not, transfer over the border, which I personally think is the best way to do it too. And I see that, yes, Humber College was a school and actually kind of still is a school that we're speaking with about this. Did that answer the question?
Looks like it.
Okay.
All right. And then let me just see. That's answered. Anything I'm just taking a look at the chat now. Sometimes people have questions.
Yeah, there's
Is
this one about
there-
the HVAC example here getting attacked. What's the operating system of choice for HVAC or for support with the HVAC example getting so we don't
Yeah,
support industries, right? It's really public sector. And most of the students use Microsoft endpoints, but typically everyone needs to know some Linux. Linux is how all of our technology is running on. So the devices that we put on the endpoints and deploy on premise, those are Linux based. The stack that's running OpenSearch and the stack that's running Elastic, those are all Linux. So Linux is more on the engineering side, but we do want students to understand scripting, Python, for example, Bash scripting, things like that. And, that's mostly Linux.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, another question. For local governments that have commercial services in place, is Pisces more about an add-on to fill the gaps, or it runs full stack independently?
That is a great question. So there are more than a few of our monitored organizations, right? Our community data sharing partners, we call them, that were a Pisces supported community and went to a commercial service and said, we want to continue Pisces monitoring specifically so that the students have signal that they can work with, right? Really to see, us raising the bench strength, it's just for a metric here. This year, there will be about 600 students going through Pisces classes at all these different schools. Of those, about half are going to say, this is not for me. I'm more, I want to get into GRC consulting or something like that, not so technical. So of that remaining 300, about half of those are going to be the cream of the crop. So right now, today, we figure that we're supplying about 150 practitioners a year to this workforce.
Not a small number. Awesome. Okay. Last chance. I'll give everyone to ask a question here. So far, great questions. And looks like there's a lot of great support in the comments.
So nobody wants to ask a question about how I actually work for Organized Crime. I'll tell you a quick story. So
Yes, please.
Penny was talking about KnowBe4. And the person that started KnowBe4 was Kevin Mitnick. And at one point, Kevin Mitnick was the most famous cyber criminal in the United States, right? The very first hashtag was Free Kevin. So it turns out that I am the person that gave Kevin Mitnick's best friend an unused account on a VAX at the University of Southern California that he and Kevin used to get into all that trouble. And whose backside do you think the FBI crawled up? Right?
Wow.
Yeah, I've got this really interesting document from Mitnick's attorney trying to pin the whole thing on me, but hey, I didn't do nothing.
Do you have it framed?
I should frame that. That's actually a good idea. I should frame that.
You should. That's a great story. Was that at the beginning of your career then, or was that like
Oh,
towards the middle?
that was when I was still going to school at USC before I got the job at JPL. I did other bad things at JPL. We can, like, again, statute of limitations is expired, but now is not the time.
Well, there will be, so we'll definitely have to have you back for some more conversations about this for another local government sector day as well.
Okay.
And some other talks. But yeah, no, thank you. This is great. Looks lots of great comments, lots of great feedback. We'll definitely have you back to tell some war stories. It sounds like you have quite a few fun ones.
Yeah.
So thank you, and I'll send you a link as well once it's ready. So appreciate it.
Okay. And I'll PDF the presentation and I will send it to you, Anthony.
Perfect. And if you have any links you want to share with anybody, feel free to just put them directly into the chat.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. All right, so now we're gonna come in with our final panel slash fireside chat. It's more of a fireside chat. So for this one, I'm just gonna quickly introduce that the fireside chat's gonna be talking about quantum encryption, and I'm gonna let them talk more about it, and I'll get out of your way. So Eugene is our moderator. Please introduce yourself, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. My name is Eugene Lau. I am the head of member relations here at INSEC-M. We are the Canadian cybersecurity cluster. And what we do is we bridge the gap between all the different organizations in the cybersecurity sector, whether it be private organizations such as SMBs and larger organizations, or it be government and other nonprofit organizations. And now I'll have Michael introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Reading, and I am the Chief Technology Officer at Quantrapy. So Quantrapy is Ottawa-based quantum cybersecurity company, and our focus is on bringing all the elements of quantum security to the enterprise, to the government, both small and medium and large organizations, all getting ready to protect your capabilities, your data, your networks against quantum attacks. And prior to being with Quantrapy the past 5 years, I spent almost 30 years with the global services firm Accenture, always in the realm of bringing emerging technology to large government and enterprise, and a big focus on cybersecurity, where I ran cybersecurity labs in both Tel Aviv and Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And now for Nicholas.
Hi there. My name is Nick Scott. I'm here from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. I work with our cryptographic engagement and standards teams. So the people that I work with closely are the ones that are basically looking at different cryptographic standards and vetting them as secure. So we work very closely with NIST in the United States and across the world as well with a number of other groups. But yeah, the big thing for our area is that we validate and verify to ensure that the cryptography that people are using is safe and secure for Canadians to use. A little bit about me. I've been working with CSE here for the last 20 plus years in various cybersecurity roles. So a wide variety of experience. Not all of it has been with cryptography. So it's still a little bit new for me, but I've got some good folks behind me that are giving me some good background. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. All right. So the structure of this fireside conversation is going to be, I'm going to ask both of you a few questions, and then I'd love to hear the perspectives of both business and government. And kind of just to start off, we'd like to hear a little bit more about Q Day. So when leaders hear about Q Day, it sounds apocalyptic. So in plain language, what is Q Day actually, and what isn't it? Let's start with Nick.
Sure. So my take on it is it's just part of the next evolution of computing, right? It's not going to be some sudden catastrophic event. We've had physicists working on quantum computers for a number of years, and we're just kind of, it's the next progression. So one of the things that everybody's worried about here is like, is my cryptography going to be secure when Q Day hits? And really, like, my take on this is that it's it's not a 0 day. It's something that if we were talking about software vulnerabilities and that kind of thing, it's like a CVE. We know that there's a vulnerability there. Fortunately now, as far as everybody knows, as far as we know, the vulnerability hasn't been exploited yet. So now is the time to patch and get in place before that Q day hits where we actually might be compromised.
So I'll do a double click, and specifically the concern is that a sufficiently large quantum device, and as Nicholas pointed out, we're not there yet. Uh, when it was first forecasted in the 90s, and we're in the 2020s, and we're still not quite there. So we had some breathing room, but not a lot. But what happens is, because a quantum computer can do math in a way that is much more powerful than a classic von Neumann-based architecture we all use every day, it will break the mathematical structures we use in every, or every is a strong word, but the vast majority of digital interactions, HTTPS, that S is secure. And we do a handshake to establish every digital connection. And there's two components. And then, in technical terms, that's asymmetric encryption. And that's really two things: key exchange and digital signature. Digital signature, which verifies your identity, who you are. And then the key exchange is, what secret are you going to use to protect the data? And quantum devices can break that handshake. And so the challenge becomes that kind of breaks everything that is derivative of that, everything from your browsing session to your long-term, if you exchange a key to do long-term storage, to if you've ever DocuSigned anything, that signature could be compromised and someone can rewrite your mortgage. So that's not desirable. And so that's why it's kind of gets a lot of hype, because it's so prevalent, but it's so distributed. And what you need, a giant quantum computer, is going to come to governments first, means there's time to dig in on this and start to figure it out. But at the brass tacks, it breaks what we have today, and therefore we got to do an upgrade to something that it can't break.
And as a follow up to that, I'm hearing a little bit from both sides about it being not yet exploited. So it sounds like it's a long and manageable transition. But then I also see on the other side of things where, if it was suddenly exploited, this would be a sudden cliff. I would like to know, from a business point of view, what really changes in this quantum era.
Well, maybe I'll jump first, and then Nicholas
Yeah,
can
go
follow
ahead.
in. So it hasn't happened as far as anyone knows, and if it has happened, it's in some deep secret government lab that they're not telling us. But with all the pundits in the world analyzing the progress of quantum devices, generally you need 4,000 qubits, logical qubits, all working together. And right now we're in the tens to hundreds, so there's room to grow. But you need about 4,000 of them working together to break, encryption. And so the question becomes, if you listen and pay attention to all the quantum announcements and can kind of decipher all the techno jargon, we're still anywhere from 2 to 4 years away from anyone getting close to that. McKinsey did a big report, and they said the window on first available attacks probably opens in 2027 and goes for a decade. So sometime the over under is 2027, the over is 37. Gartner Group pinned it at 2029. So if Gardner went out on a limb and put a pin in the map at 2029 as when the first window of breaks could happen, and again, it's going to be government led, then that says time to get off the sidelines and get moving is now. So I don't know, Nicholas, if you want to elaborate on that thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting looking at these different groups. Like everybody, there's a lot of different groups out there that are assessing different dates. Our organization has aligned with our dates are quite close to the British and Australian US dates as well. So we're forecasting somewhere in the 2030s. We're not going to say, it's 2030 or 2039, but we're ballparking in that 2030 range, right? So when Eugene asks about, from a business point of view, what is it that we need to focus on, and do we have lead time and stuff? It's a really complex process to do all of the upgrades to get everybody quantum ready. So when I say something like, oh, it's 2030, well, that's only 5 years away. If and if you want to be like super I don't know, lazy about it or whatever, and say, oh, you know what, I got till 2039. You actually don't. We need to start getting this stuff forward. And I think one of the things that we'll get into over the course of the discussion here is the harvest now, decrypt later threat, and the other threats that can be posed by quantum computing. But really, at the end of the day, the time to act is now. I mean, Michael touched on Shor's, well, touched on the 90s, and we have Shor's algorithm that proved that should a quantum computer be created, should that exist, we have the capability to break today's cryptography. Fine. We've known about this risk since the 90s, and everybody's kind of pushed this to the right a little bit further, and nobody's actioning it as strongly as we'd like to see people move forward on this. So like there's a lot of industry out there that is working to promote this, but it just hasn't hit kind of Main Street yet where everybody's talking about this, and this is something that we need to do today.
Thanks, Nick. You kind of mentioned it a little bit in your answer there, but how worried should organizations be today about harvest now, decrypt later attacks, especially for long-lived data like health, financial, or government records?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely concern to be had there, but it's the biggest thing we can do now is protect put steps in place today to protect future data transmission, future data storage, any of that kind of stuff. We can't wind back the clock. Like if somebody's harvested something in the past, it's already been harvested. But again, the threat of that is, I forget, sorry.
Oh, your audio cut out.
Better? Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Okay, apologies. I get too hand wavy and it throws everything off. So I apologize for that. But one of the two of you, I think it was Michael, touched on governments being the first ones that'll be able to have a quantum computer or access to quantum computing that's sufficiently strong enough to do that kind of thing. It could be a school, it could be anywhere that does develop this kind of thing. But what I do want to say is it's typically like governments that have the resources. Those are the only kinds of folks that are going to have the resources to do that kind of harvest thing. So for me, if I was a business owner, I don't know how concerned I would be about somebody capturing my.
Oh, I think we lost him. But I can.
Yeah, no.
We
Sorry.
lost you for a second there.
Are we back?
Your audio is, your video is not.
I apologize. Michael, please feel free to jump in there.
Well, I'll jump in, and I think the points are great. The issue almost become like, great point, right? The bell's rung. If your data's already been harvested, well, that part's gone, right? So it's a point forward. Where it starts to matter most is that, some people ask, is there any evidence of it even happening, or is it just a boogeyman? Well,
Right.
Interestingly, not too long ago, there was an anomaly in the internet where internet traffic from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. was rerouted through China. And what's in Los Angeles? Well, part of it is Hollywood, but part of it is a lot of defense and space contractors like SpaceX communicating with, I don't know, the Department of Defense. And so there was some interesting traffic, and who rerouted it? Nobody knows, right? So if you're not SpaceX and you're not the Pentagon, are you going to get hoovered up? Maybe, because you're in the same pipe, because it was the internet. And so that's one thing. But the other kind of imperative, besides making this some kind of boogeyman, is regulatory, right? Because if you think about the current laws around data breaches, if you're an IT organization and you're responsible for data privacy, the penalties are there if you don't take all actions to protect the data. And if it gets swept up and then gets breached later, within the regulatory, sometimes it's 5 years, and Eugene, you brought up, it's, government records, it's 10 years, 25 years, depending on the privacy laws or the secrecy laws, especially when it comes to government or classified data. Well, you've breached that regulatory framework. So it's a kind of almost becomes less of a day zero, but more of a, there's now a threat. There are steps, or we'll talk more about the steps you can take to be compliant. So now the regulators will expect you to start taking actions to be compliant. And so I would take this as another form of data breach, another necessary compliance activity, and then put it into your compliance playbook and act on it accordingly, like you would any other privacy breach type threats. And I think that's a great way to frame it to kind of cut through the hype and focus on what's the playbook.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael. Like, sorry to just jump back in there, Eugene, but like, it's not, we don't want to make it into some big boogeyman. We don't know that it's happening. We can't prove that anything like that is happening. But mathematically, the risk is there. So that's what we talk about and talk about how we can try to prevent that.
It's actually a really good transition, Nick. So you've been advising the Government of Canada departments on their move to post-quantum cryptography. What are the top 2 to 3 strategies that you recommend that also apply to municipalities, provinces, and private companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Do I have it written down here? Yeah, so it's ITSM 40001. I'll post something in the chat as we wrap up here, but we have a roadmap that we've laid out for government departments to follow. We are working on stuff for smaller, like provincial municipal government and private business as well for their information. But this is open to anybody who wants to read it. You can see what our plans are for the Government of Canada. And really, the first thing that I would say to anybody is start with the identification process. We need to get out there, whoever's like, if we're talking about CISOs or whomever is responsible for the network security or information security of a business should really be out there identifying where cryptography is being used in their business. And then once you've identified that, you can start prioritizing which things need to be updated first. So calculating your risk, calculating which data is most at risk of being compromised, and what an outage may cause you. So I would start hands down with an identification today and just try to identify what cryptography you're using.
I think that's the first challenge is always knowing how how much do we have to remediate. Does any and so Nicholas's point is dead on. The great news is there's both starting to be some great published methodologies and frameworks, but also the good news is there's starting to be more and more tooling so that this isn't the old school make a spreadsheet, start filling it in yourself kind of dealio. You can, in fact, tap into a number of tools. Some are open source. Some come from vendors, like an IBM or other systems integrators, all have their tools. Some of the technology platforms, like a Sandbox, offer them. So again, you can, depending on if you have certain vendor partners, you can chat with them, service partners, see if they've got one. But even we're starting to see some of that tooling come in from the infrastructure itself. So for example, and this is not a commercial, this is just an example, but Palo Alto Networks in their current Orion firewall, the current PAN-OS version, they have a feature where they will, report on the cryptographic stacks being used for different connections, both inside the firewall and outside the firewall. So they can basically create a running inventory, and they even have some tricks that they'll even convert it. If you give it the okay, it'll convert it to a post-quantum encryption. So, and I'm sure, and I know specifically just because I just saw the announcement on Palo Alto that they happen to have that feature. That's not to say that others don't, or, so it's not, again, it's not a promotion of that one vendor, but it's an example. And since those organizations like a Fortinet or Juniper, Cisco, they all follow each other pretty closely on feature sets. If somehow Palo Alto was the leader in the clubhouse, others will be soon there, because that's just a great thing, because that's giving you the real world, logging of what's going on. And then you can start to, and again, I think as Nicholas said, if it's, end user connections that aren't, critical to you, that's great. If it's a connection to to another government agency or to a bank or something else that has got, again, that most sensitive data that would be the most harmful if it was breached, those are the connections, those are the systems that you want to knock down first before you go all the way to the edges.
So if you were dropped into a mid-sized organization tomorrow as CISO, what would your first 90 days of quantum readiness look like?
So if it was me, I would again start with the inventory, start trying to find out what kind of cryptography we're using, where we're using it, how we're using it, and why we're using it in each of our different applications or whatever service it is that we're providing. But in addition to that, I would start taking steps to implement cryptographic agility across the organization. So the idea here is you want to be agile enough to be able to quickly respond to any sort of I'll say compromise. Again, I don't want to fearmonger or whatever, but if something comes up where something is no longer valid, something is no longer doing what you expect it to do, you want to be able to pivot really quickly, like turn on a dime, as they say, right? And let's use different kinds of cryptography. So what we're seeing now is devices that are coming out, hardware, different kinds of software, where the cryptography is actually treated as more modular, so you can quickly swap out to a different algorithm or a different type of system, so that should something be no longer protecting you the way that you think it should, you're agile enough to be able to respond as quickly as possible.
And
So
I'll
yes, yeah, sorry to wrap up my 90 days. Yeah, it would be inventory and then agility.
so I'll riff on that a bit as well. And those are, right on. But one of the things you can do right along those lines is upgrade to the latest versions of stuff,
Oh, for sure.
because
Yeah, yeah.
because Windows, right? The latest version of .NET. Now, after umpteen billion years of Microsoft saying it's got to be all Microsoft all the time, they now support underpinning OpenSSL 3.x. Well, the beauty of OpenSSL 3.x framework is this exact idea of cryptographic providers, which means I can now, and to keep it in the Windows dialect, drop in a DLL, right, a dynamic library that is the cryptographic engine of choice, and as a result, just by dropping in a new dynamic library, I'm upgraded. And so if you soften the ground by getting on the latest version of Windows, then when you're ready to migrate, it's a drop-in upgrade, not a rip and replace or a big reformat. So that right there is a great example of where. And what's interesting is you'd say, well, why is this a new thing? Well, for a long time, there was I'd say a good better part of this century, there were so many early mistakes around people rolling their own cryptography that a
Mhm.
lot of the protocols like TLS and others were updated to hard code the allowable cryptography. So the whole idea was, you folks can't do it right yourselves, so we're going to protect you from yourselves by locking it down. Well, that worked for a period of time, but now coming back to kind of back to haunt us a bit with now things are kind of static and we got to get back to dynamic, but still got to have great guidance. And, like we're getting from leadership like Nicholas on what are the right cryptographic primitives. But then now having a modern way to migrate to them. So no matter what, get on the latest version and you'll clean up a lot of the sins of the past and kind of almost
For sure.
prepare yourself as the vendors themselves embrace crypto agility. So again, leveraging the ecosystem, leveraging your partners is always going to be part of it. And so as part of that inventory, it's not just, the custom apps you have yourself, but your major cloud provider. What's their storyline? When are they going to go? Amazon last week announced finally that AWS front door supports TLS 1.3 and post-quantum cryptography. Wow. Why it took them a year after the new standards were released, nobody knows, but they did it. So if you're an Amazon shop, cha-ching, and oh, by the way, if you use Chrome, it's already got it. And so suddenly using Chrome to access Amazon, they do the handshake. That connection is post-quantum. You did nothing except get on the latest version, right? That's the beauty is you can get almost the 80/20 rule with just refresh and looking where you've got technical version debt and cleaning that up might actually soften the ground quite a bit and lower the lift to get the rest of the way.
It's sounding like updates are quite an easy way for organizations to have low regret and low effort. I'm curious to explore this thread on what kind of moves can organizations take in the next 12 months that'll still make sense in addition to these updates, even if quantum timelines slip, especially because we're seeing that I'm hearing, I think you mentioned 2029, and then I heard from Nick around the 2030s and not in a specific range. What can some people do that's low effort and I guess low regret rather?
So I don't know, like I'm gonna pitch another like cyber center service here, but the cryptographic module validation. Hello?
Yeah.
Check. Okay, sorry. Um, uh, I'll try to sit more more static. So where's it going? Cryptographic module validation program. So the CMVP that we do in conjunction with NIST is something that vendors use to basically accredit the implementation of their cryptographic modules. So as a consumer, as somebody installing new IT across your government business, what have you, you can ask your vendors if they've had their stuff verified against the CMVP, and ask to talk, or at least talk to them about their validation and the cryptography that they're using. This highlights to them that this is actually of interest to industry. There hasn't been a huge push across all vendors because people aren't asking for it yet. It's one of those things where it's like chicken egg. What are we going to do? Are we going to wait for the vendors to create a product, or are we going to demand as consumers that vendors build a product for us that we need? So it's a little bit kind of, let's meet in the middle. And I would say just start talking to your vendors of the different tools that you're using, and ask how they're being validated and verified for post-quantum safety.
So I'm gonna take us in a slightly different direction on this point because I want to introduce another topic.
Sure.
And this seems like a logical point, and it's something that is a no regrets type move. If you think about what we've been talking about so far, which is the cryptographic engine themselves, the actual algorithm that does the encryption, of the key exchange and the digital signature, that's going to be first attacked by quantum. Um, well, if that's the lock, what's the key, right? Well, we always talk about public key, and there, of course, that's the cryptographic key. Well, what is a cryptographic key made from? It's made from random numbers. And what's interesting is, and another, kind of the technical term a lot of people throw around for the raw material of random numbers is also entropy. So I apologize in advance. I will use them interchangeably. Random numbers are entropy. They're one and the same. It's a block of unformed raw noise that gets fed into the algorithm to mint the cryptographic key, whether it's a public-private key pair for PKI, whether it's the symmetric keys for AES-256. Well, if you have a strong lock but a weak key, it's like I've got all these two-factor authentication, but my password is password 123. And so, in fact, NIST, right as they announced the brand new standards, had a whole webinar from leading researchers from like University of Chicago, Duke University, and other corporate labs that explained how the new post-quantum algorithms are actually entropy hungry, right? Because they have longer key lengths than the classic ones they replace. And what turns out is if you put in bad random, you get a bad result. And they actually showed that these brand new, shiny algorithms that even a gigantic quantum computer can't attack fall apart like tissue paper using today's compute if you give it a bad random number to start. And so it's one of those things where I'm going to build this fortress on sand. And so one of the things that each CISO or CIO or chief risk officer can look at and say, hey, where do we get our random numbers? And just trusting the vendor, the operating system, well, actually, that's not always a good case because, in fact, in the last week, AMD came out and said, "Oh, by the way, our CPUs make bad random." And so, if you've been using them for cryptographic purposes, which everyone does by default, oops, you're nothing. You got a big problem. And so, it's a corollary. It's not on the mainstream of the post-quantum security, but it is a important topic in cryptographic strength overall. In fact, Key Factor did a study, and 1 out of every 172 digital certificates on the internet are considered cryptographically weak. And Cisco fixed a previous problem where they had 121,000 routers with the same digital identity because they're using bad random. So if I went and bought a surplus router that had the same certificate as a D&D router, I'm inside the military network. And so those are just, publicized case studies where weak random led to weak cryptography. So if you're doing all this great work to inventory and understand what algorithms you're using, ask yourself the corollary, and where are they getting the random numbers for that? Because if I upgrade the random in parallel, even if I haven't switched over to new algorithms, the current algorithms, the classic ones, like those Cisco ones, like the ones key factors found, which are based on classic algorithms like RSA and ECC, they can be improved and protected. So it's a no regrets move to say, let's make sure that I'm always using good random when I'm thinking, if I'm opening up the can of worms that is uh, update and modernization of my cryptographic capability set and really giving an inventory, let's not leave the random numbers on the sidelines. Let's think about it too. But it's 100% no regrets removed because it hardens what I already have. So therefore, how can better security ever be a bad idea?
That's great, actually. And it ties back to your point about people trying to hand roll their own security.
Oh,
A different mic here and see if this goes.
you're back.
Gonna try another mic. Hopefully that still works and doesn't sound too awful. But yeah, it goes back to your point about people trying to hand roll their own security. It's so important to have every aspect of that cryptography properly in place. Otherwise, it can all fall apart. Like you said, that palace on a bed of sand.
Love to explore an idea of a kind of to map this out for everyone. How would you guys break a sensible PQC roadmap into phases like discover, plan, pilot, and scale? And what are the key outcomes in each phase? Let's start with Michael.
Well, I think that's the classic playbook, and I love it because we've seen it work before with journey to cloud, right? As folks look at what am I hosting on-prem, what can I migrate to cloud? If you think about or going digital or going mobile, right? Over the years, we've seen this kind of movie repeat whenever there's kind of a big and I think Nicholas said, evolution of, or changeover in an industry in IT or technology base, it's time to kind of follow that playbook. And but I think it all, and Nicholas said it, which I thought was a really key point. You want to kind of do it on a risk adjusted basis, right? Because in the end, there's lots of nooks and crannies in almost every organization. And don't let all be the enemy of most, right? The 80/20 rule says, if you don't want to swallow, if you don't want to be the python that's swallowing the elephant and you want to swallow the mouse, then go ahead and say, what is our highest volume system, or what is our most critical system, or what is the one that has the most regulatory risk or the highest penalties, if you want to think negative but positive, what is the most mission critical? And let's go through the life cycle, at least with the identification and prioritization of those. When it comes to practice and you start to say, okay, well, now I want to roll up my sleeves and I actually want to transition. Well, then maybe you don't start with the crown jewel of your first transition. Maybe you pick something that in doing that, you said, okay, this system's kind of a second tier system, or a little less mission critical if it somehow went offline, or went down for a little bit or got a little slower. It wouldn't throw our business function or our mission into chaos. So let's cut our teeth on something that's maybe second tier. But I would still take a hard look first, I would say, at mission critical, just because that when the time comes, that's what's got to get made upgraded and bulletproof and quantum secure ultimately, because that's your reputation or your mission or your business depends on it.
Yeah, and I like great. Yeah, totally agree with all of that. The question about the landmarks or milestones that we want to set, that part kind of tripped me up because I'm like, I don't know that I have really hard landmarks that I would say, but I would recommend that as you're going through each of those, I think you listed them as 4 stages: discover, plan, pilot, scales. I would say you need to do all of them kind of at the same time. I'm not saying like you're going to start at scale, but as you're planning, you're going to roll out. You're going to have to roll out and start planning. You're going to have to start implementing things. And I believe that as you start implementing, you're going to find more things kind of as you peel back the rocks or the covers, you're going to find some more stuff in there. So you really need to be open-minded that you're going to have to keep developing and building your plan while implementing the other stuff or applying the other stuff as you go.
And I think a corollary to that exact point is that's actually a great thing because if you can knock down a couple, right?
Yeah.
A, you kind of learn by doing, but B, it makes a tangible progress. And if you're the CIO or the CISO or chief risk officer or in charge of risk, and you've got to report to leadership, to government regulator, to a board, if it's, private enterprise, um, you can say we've made progress. Like, because sometimes I've seen this in the past. We have a year of analysis. And what did we accomplish? We made a really big spreadsheet. Whoa, that's not motivating. If you said, oh, by the way, we went through and we did a Windows upgrade, just to pick on that example I had earlier. And in doing so, we now have all of our desktops are now, when they connect to the firewall, they're all using post-quantum cryptography. So we just knocked down 5,000 desktops. Oh, whoa, we made progress. Like already check. We're already post-quantum on certain things. And there's some other things we can talk about that you can do, again, back with firewalls or routers that can be done, again, no regrets moves, pretty easy. But then you can check the box and say, progress has been made. So that's motivating because it's not like, oh, this is just analysis paralysis. This is like we've knocked some things over. We've made some progress. We're not completely sitting here naked on the internet, if you would. And therefore, that keeps momentum so that leadership doesn't go, great, another 5-year program. It's like, no, you can say, no, it's going to be, it's going to be 5 years, but there'll be successes along the way we can celebrate and leadership can, claim victory and, say that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
It's sounding like someone really has to be in an organization, really champion this process of post-quantum. Who do you guys think should really own quantum readiness inside an organization? And I guess which teams absolutely need to be on at the table in this conversation and hands-on?
Michael, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a great, it's a question I'll give it since I was so many years in consulting. It depends, right? But I think Eugene, you're on the right track that you do need someone, and that someone can be a small, steering committee. It doesn't have to be able to be just a singular individual, but it's got to be someone that is tagged with it, right? That like is on the hook, that owns it, is the champion. A lot of it, the lifting and the shifting is going to fall, historically, on either your IT department or your services providers. But again, especially if you've already shifted to public cloud or managed services or shared services, then those entities that have responsibility are going to ultimately have to, they handle that kind of upgrade or migration or refactoring, whatever it is. So there may be, depending again how you assemble your IT stack, the doers are going to be varied, and probably there's no organization where there's just one group that does it all. And so, because you've already, just by nature of delivery, how you deliver your networks or deliver your systems, you've already had multiple providers. But that's why you need a rally point, someone that day in, day out worries about, are we making progress? Are we getting there? And generally, it could be the CIO if the CIO really has a high security thing. If there is a named CISO, yeah. If you have the idea of a risk officer, someone like that can that's trying to deal with risk, they could be the champion. But I do think trying to pin it to generally one of those three. But I'm sure there's others, but that's what comes to my mind.
Yeah, I would agree fully with that. It like my first knee jerk would say like CISO, but really what you need is somebody designated as the official responsible for this. It has to be somebody that can take accountability for it, somebody that recognizes that this is their task. This isn't something just being run off the corner of a desk. This is actually mission critical and needs to be followed through all the way through. And like Michael said, there's cloud providers. If you've already kind of pushed your IT or your stack out to cloud providers, they're working on that for you, but it's up to you to make sure that they're actually implementing the things that you need them to have. And if you're managing your own hardware, your own kit, then that comes back to you. You need to have people on hand who can follow it through, make sure that it's being implemented. And if you don't have the resources in-house, I hazard to say, bring in somebody, a contractor or somebody who can help you see that all the way through so that you make sure that you implement it properly.
But importantly, especially like we've seen with the public clouds and the major SaaS platforms, they've, in varying stages starting to roll these capabilities out, but quite often you have to turn them on.
Yeah.
And because they don't want to, again, they want to be, they don't, they're trying not to ram things down people's throats, uh, or be seen as making unilateral decisions for their customers. So the funny thing might be you're on a platform, and I don't, it doesn't matter, vendor X, cloud
Yeah.
X, SaaS X, and it's been out for 6 months and you didn't know, and you didn't turn it on. And so, and then if someone goes, hey, oh, I heard that, Cloud X, has this, are we using it? And you're like, I don't know. Right. So, oh, hey, and, or you say, yeah, we're covered because Cloud X has got it. And you're like, but did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. And also because sometimes it consumes a little more resource. And so, and since clouds often get paid on resource consumption, that's why they don't want to say, why did my bill go up? Right. So they want you to opt in for your bill to go up.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And that kind of leads me to my next question. And I'm sure the audience has a lot of these questions because there's a lot of people that are relying heavily on SaaS and cloud. What are the most important questions to start asking vendors about PQC and crypto agility? Michael, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think that's it, first and foremost is, and you can ask them, or you can obviously you can Google it or Chat GPT it, whatever your search engine of choice is. You can see what they've publicly said, but if not, you always have an account rep and ask them specifically what is your PQC migration roadmap, right? What is your timeline? And I would be pretty nervous if you talk to a service provider, a platform provider, and they're like, we don't have one. That I would be something like, that would, again, that would be that'd be a concern, especially if there's a future re-up, then like, hold on a second, because then it goes back to Nicholas, you said, which is if you don't ask for it, and then you start saying, well, okay, well then let's talk about your FIPS certifications. Let's talk about your migration from TLS 1.2 to TLS 1.3. And I will tell you, I'm going to leave names out of it, but a number of, for example, firewall manufacturers to this day may oft talk about supporting post-quantum cryptography on the front side, but on the backside management plane, they're using TLS 1.2, and which by definition is only classic algorithms. So it's the goose and gander. And so their front door, fully modernized, their back door, which is on the inside, so safer, right? Isn't. So it's an interesting question to kind of interrogate them and say, all right, what is your game plan? And again, also, and they'll fall over themselves to brief you and brief your teams because, for example, I mentioned again not as a commercial, but as an example, Palo Alto Orion, your Palo Alto account rep would love to brief you on Orion and get you to upgrade to Orion, right? And so they would love that. So good news is give them a chance to pitch you on how awesome sauce they are and what they're doing.
Yeah, sorry, maybe a little off topic here from the question, but like Michael brings up a great point, right? Like you look at the network security or you look at any sort of security, you've got that hard shell on the outside and soft and squishy on the inside because we just trust everybody inside. This becomes a challenge for me, like having worked with national security my entire career. We're always worried about the insider threat. So that is just as much something that we factor into our solutions as the hard shell, trying to keep the outsiders from getting in. We also have to worry about outsiders that we've mistakenly let in, right? So that's part of that too. So sorry, I kind of lost the plot there on the question, I think, but important questions. Just make sure that, like Michael said, make sure that they have a key plan, roadmap, some sort of plan on how they're going to support you through this transition period towards post-quantum computing or post-quantum cryptography.
I want to jump into a little bit of I guess, change of pace here and kind of go back to regulation standards and ecosystem. and kind of explore a little bit about how we're going to expect PQC adoption over the next 3 to 5 years. Before I do that, I'd just like to remind the audience to paste into the chat any questions you may have for a Q&A. We're anticipating to have a Q&A shortly in the next 7 to 9 minutes-ish, something like that. But yeah, to kind of start off, how do you guys see regulators, standards bodies, and I guess large buyers influencing the pace of PQC adoption over the next 3 to 5 years, and even further to that, because we're looking, I guess, in the 2030s, next 3 to 10 years, maybe?
So I'll jump in first, if that's all right. And like we have a team of people that work with me who engage with different standards bodies like ISO and IETF and a number of others. And part of that there is making sure that we are tracking what is happening in the international standards community, make sure that we're aware of what standards people are pushing forward, make sure that Canada's interests are also being represented in those bodies. So part of what we're seeing in there is a huge drive towards these post-quantum algorithms and things like, was it August 2024, we finally got the NIST standards 203, 204, FIPS 203 and FIPS 204, so that we have some sort of standardized, approved, quantum safe algorithms that we can use going forward. And we're seeing these standards bodies trying to find ways to implement these into their standards and make them part of just the standards that we use every day that most people actually don't even need to be aware of. They're just kind of out there for you to use. But yeah, standards bodies are starting to adopt these things, and there's a huge drive to get these implemented into the standards before Q Day comes.
Yeah, right. Great example. And I should have it memorized, but no, it's like only so many things in life. You can remember so much stuff, especially get a little bit older. But IETF just came out with an update to the standard for PKI for digital certificates that formally sort out and clear the path for those standard post-quantum algorithms. There's a working way to do it, but now it's been memorialized as the adopted standard, which is great for interoperability, right? So that you don't have to get into, and again, good news. Generally speaking, most of the major, name any major vendor, they've been pretty on board and collaborative with a lot of this stuff because they know that nobody lives in a homogeneous all one vendor stack, and interoperability is the name of the game. And so there are already ones that for quantum upgrades to like IPsec, VPNs, which are a big target for harvest now, decrypt later. That's been in place for a while so that any two firewall vendors, any two router vendors can make secure connections seamlessly. And, there's been a lot of work to do that. So the great news is the work of like the IETF, and, with NIST and Canada and other countries leading the way on the algorithms themselves, that's been a real positive. But importantly, another aspect, by law, in the U.S., for example, which is the U.S. government is the largest purchaser of stuff, IT and other in the U.S., single largest entity, and therefore one of the biggest in the world. Starting in 2027, the U.S. government cannot procure anything that does not have PQC. Now, obviously, pencils don't have encryption, so okay. But anything that has encryption has to have PQC and starting 2027. It's a law, right? So if you are a supplier to the US government, guess what? You've got to upgrade to that. But that also, and if you're not, that's a large tail that will wag the dog because everybody who does sell. So for example, we got a call from, I'll leave the brand name out of it, but they make coffee makers that take pods. And they called us and asked us about, our PQC toolkit. And we're like, why is a coffee company calling us about, post-quantum cryptography? Because Uncle Sam drinks a lot of coffee. And they are in every commissary, in every government building, in every military base. And they have some of them that have remote diagnostics. And so if they want to keep selling coffee to Uncle Sam, they have to upgrade their coffee makers to PQC. So the trickle down effect of, and EU passed the EU Quantum Readiness Act, slightly less timeline, but still this decade. Um, so those massive wallets, drive commerce and drive vendor behavior, which then whips around and becomes so that all the major vendors that anyone else would be using are going to go along for the ride. So that's a case where there is a regulatory slash legal framework for procurement that drives purchasing behavior that drives mass adoption. So kind of a virtuous cycle. So again, surprisingly, the government somehow, maybe inadvertently, is helping the rest of us.
That makes a lot of sense. We're hearing a lot of different things where, and it's not just in quantum, and it's in other things like privacy and security, where you have a careful balance of who's leading the pack, or on a much simpler level. Let's talk about EVs. There are people like industry, like Tesla is really moving the industry forward in terms of EV, and that's industry adoption first. Whereas where you're talking about here, Michael, it's government adoption first and government requirements first, which influences industry to start following suit. So, kind of on this kind of thread here, I'm very curious, Nick, do you expect quantum readiness to start showing up explicitly in Canadian government RFPs or security questionnaires?
Yeah, 100%. I like it's funny. I got my title up there on the wallpaper behind me, and it's engagement and standards. Part of my job here is to bang the drum for the importance of post quantum readiness and make sure that people are talking about this. Make sure that it's something that is front of mind. So absolutely, we have a number of steps that, and I'll post this up. I've got this ready to post into our chat here, but our roadmap includes cutoff dates and planning and dates for when everybody should be transferred over to quantum safe algorithms. So I'll say 2030 for high value systems, high importance systems, and then everybody else in the government, in the federal government, should be cut over by 2035. And then with that 2035 date, we will be talking about deactivating or deprecating the what we'd call traditional algorithms today, or the classic algorithms from today. So this is absolutely going to become a huge thing in our contracting. We are going to expect vendors to honor the requirements to include PQC or a capacity to have some level of cryptographic agility in their hardware, software, whatever it is that the government of Canada is buying.
And we're anticipating, I guess, security clearances to be updated for that as well. Is that correct?
What necessarily do you mean by security clearances?
Can't remember off the top of my head, but
okay. Like, are you talking about like engagement with vendors so that vendors can engage with us on sensitive
correct.
Topics? Or
yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's programs already in place, and that's well outside my wheelhouse. So I'm I can't speak too much to it, but we have programs where we are working with vendors to make sure that they have all the information they need to be able to implement the technology that we as Canadians need.
That makes sense. To kind of close us out, and I'd like to circle back and kind of summarize our entire conversation here today. And I'd love to explore the idea of what is maybe one concrete action that you want every person in this room to take in the next 30 days on quantum readiness? And I guess we can start with Nick.
Just start talking about it. Talk to vendors, talk to other people in your, I would say in your community, like in your technology community, whatever, but try to get to the edges of it so that it's actually growing. Let's not talk, just have coffee with the other people that know about quantum computing. Like I engage regularly with a number of quantum computing companies in Canada. That's not who I'm talking about. And I'm not saying, go grab grandma and grandpa for a cup of coffee and talk to them about quantum computing either, but there's a happy medium somewhere in there where we can start pushing that envelope and make this a little bit more of a common topic to discuss.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's but I guess within your organization, why not organize, make it, kind of a little more proactive or additionally proactive because everything Nicholas said is dead on. Schedule a lunch and learn, right? Get your team together and get somebody to go, do a little homework, a little chat GPT, put together a little, a half-hour presentation on the topic. The good news AI is our friend on this topic to help you kind of rapidly pull some together, and it'll probably be 80% true. As all AI is, there'll be some hallucinations in there. But point is, schedule it like an active learning session, right? And learn about how you can go in if you're using Chrome and see where the settings are. Just, you don't have to turn them on, but just know, oh, that's where I would find them. Or, one of your one or two major vendors to pull up, get their blog posts or their security roadmap and talk about it. So I would schedule an actual active learning session with your team, because then that makes it real, that makes it purposeful, and brings it to life. And I think that would be, because then you can start to brainstorm. Okay, now how do we start to get management engaged? How do we start to get an agenda? How do we get somebody assigned to make this a job, or an activity that needs to get done? So it's how to use that as a jumping off point to catalyze the road ahead.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the audience here for see if anyone have any questions. I actually have one more surprise one for you guys, but I'm getting a little tired of hearing my own voice, so I'd love to answer for a few other people. But
Let me
looks like
take a
action
look
items.
at the Q&A section and see if there's anything that we can see.
I do have one though. Kind
Go
of
ahead.
For my question, because my family actually runs a SMB themselves, and they would fall into this kind of category where a lot of the different organizations and smaller businesses across Canada fall under, which is that a lot of people don't know about quantum, let alone cybersecurity. So for smaller municipalities or SMBs that can't track every NIST or standards update, what's a pragmatic way for them to follow the pack without falling behind? What can I tell my parents to do?
I'll be the first to promote the publications from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, right? I just posted a bunch of publications that my team has been very closely involved in the last 12 months. At the bottom of that, we have the link to the Cyber Center homepage. I would just go straight there and look for the most recent updates. If you have questions about anything, there's publications on a wide variety of topics. You can just throw that in and search for pubs on that. We also have contact info there as well. So like for SMBs, like your family business, I would say reach out to the Cyber Center if you have concerns, if you have questions, and we can point you to the right resources. We have teams available to respond to those kinds of calls for Canadians.
Well, and I would then, just echo the point about, no doubt they're using certain, platforms to run their business, right? Some ERP or marketing platform like a HubSpot, whatever it might be, for on the commerce side and sales side, or some kind of ERP or payroll like a Workday or something, a Salesforce. I would pick whatever. Yeah, I'd start with whoever they pay the most to, whoever's bill is the biggest. Go check it out. Go see what they're up to, right? And again, you have an account rep because someone's always trying to sell you something. So ask, put it back on the account rep. Tell me, you want my subscription renewal. Talk to me about your security. Give me your latest story, but in business lingo, not in techno geek. But in business lingo, tell me what you're doing to protect me. And if this is a thing, tell me what your company's roadmap is. So put the work on the sales guy or girl to get back to you, because then it'll be telling how reactive they are and how knowledgeable they are, and that also tells you, because you're assuming that they're protecting your data and your business. This is kind of a barometer to see, are they forward thinking, or are they or is security a lower priority than money? In which case, maybe they're not the right platform partner for your business.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. It sounds like my next call following this is actually going to be to Intuit QuickBooks. I'm going to grill them about their PQC roadmap and their adoption.
So actually on that, I have a question as well. It's a little bit of a long one, so I'm going to try to digest it here quickly. So somebody sent me quite a big message. Okay, okay. So basically, large companies like City of Vancouver can, poke their vendors to say, hey, you need to be PQC, otherwise we're not going to work with you. What about smaller companies? Is there any leverage or any advice that you have for, let's say, 100-person organization that's working with a vendor that's not PQC ready, but maybe don't necessarily have the financial contracts behind them to force them. Is there any advice that you give that we could use as a carrot instead of a stick, I guess?
I don't know. I mean, I like my knee jerk is what Michael was saying already. Find out who your biggest bill is and ask them what their plans are. And if they don't have the time for you or they don't have the answers for you, maybe they're not the right business for you. I don't want to be, that negative about it, but I think a number of small businesses coming together and asking for the same thing is going to get you the same result, right? I mean, we may not all have contracts as big as the city of Vancouver. However, your smaller towns like Lumbee, BC may come in with all the other, you've got Lumbee and Coldstream and all these others all coming together and saying, hey, this is what we're all doing together. Let's go there.
Yeah, no, I think that Nicholas, I was gonna make that exact point. I would go at it everybody's a member of some either chamber of commerce or industry association, even local or national. So if you're part of a national association, get your national association on it. If you're part of a local chamber of commerce, band together, right? Because then you get enough, of the local merchants together. That's enough of buying power that, and again, probably 80/20 rule, you're probably all using some of the similar stuff. And as a result, that's enough. But it's voice of the customer, right? Because if enough folks are banding together and putting the word out on the street, that's what's going to get vendors to, if they don't already have a game plan, to make a game plan. And that's what we need to have happen.
Okay, so basically, collaboration in the end it makes people stronger. Even as a small, large companies, they get that threat intel. A lot of times that's a lot of the collaboration you do, but a lot of the small companies can collaborate together as well to have a little bit more power in purchasing and things like that. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. All right. Okay, looks like we are actually at time. Surprisingly, today has been on time for once in every session. So, with that, I'm gonna say I appreciate both of your time today. This was or all three of your time today, sorry. This was a fantastic session with some amazing speakers, and we definitely have a lot to now digest and hopefully review once the recording goes live. So. Thanks again, Nicholas, Michael, and Eugene, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, everybody, for having us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right, and with that, I'm just going to do some quick little closing remarks. I just want to say thanks again to everybody that attended. All the stuff that we talked about, go share it. That's what it was here. That's what these sessions are for. I want to thank again Renata and the Municipal Finance Authority for making this happen, and ISACA Vancouver for creating this local government or local sector days and continuing allowing us to keep doing it consistently. So thanks everybody, and now that you've come to this event, you'll be invited to the next one as well. So keep an eye out once we have that set up. All right, thanks a lot, and I'll also send you once we have the link available. I'll also follow up from this event listing with the link. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time today.